Yes, ma'am.
Welcome everybody to a special session of our No Lake County. It's special because of all that we went through last summer. We're going to talk about that, and it's special because this month, all month long, we've done oral history with our Book to Action program. And so this is an oral history of what went on with the fires this summer. Before we get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about some library business. The Friends of the Library, there's forms up on the table. They provide all of the refreshments for us. They're a great organization, and the money they collect with our book sale out front goes to buying us books and all kinds of other things. So they're wonderful for us. Anybody wants to join, they're over there. Also, there's some program evaluation forms. Let us know if there's anything you want to have as a program in Lake County libraries, and we'll try to make it happen. There's also some newsletters on the podium. There's also some books. We have some books left for Book to Action. If anybody wants a book, they can get a book free through our grant. And then we also have some things provided by the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, straight out on the table outside the door. Some things about evacuation, animal evacuation, creating a fire-safe neighborhoods. So we're still not out of the woods with fires, so we still need to think about the summer coming up. Also, we got a grant from the state library for a crisis collection because of our fire. We bought a whole bunch of books on recovering from events and how to prevent things. And so there's a few of the books out on the table, straight out also. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce everybody. They're going to have 10 to 20 minutes to talk. We'll take a little break for some refreshments, and then we can ask questions. If we ask questions, we'll never get through there's a lot of 7 of them. So. The first one is John Hamner. He is married to Tina, who is from our literacy department. And he works for Calliope County Water District, and he's going to tell us about the impact of the fire on the water district there. And next is Linda Green, and she tells me she's worked for CAL FIRE, CDF CAL FIRE for 30 years plus. And she has a project she's doing called the Valley Fire Stories, which is to benefit firefighters that were injured and displaced. So maybe she can tell us some about that. She is a division chief with Sonoma Lake Napa unit for CAL FIRE. And then Darlene Hekamovich, she has volunteered with the literacy department for years. That's where I knew her from. And she also lost her home in the fire. And then we have Elizabeth Larson, who is the owner and editor for the Lake County News. So that'll be a whole different perspective on the fire. And then we have Lori Gray. She's a volunteer in fire prevention. Sorry. Can't read my own writing. For CAL FIRE. She also does other volunteering in other organizations, and last year on our Book to Action, she was here with the Hunger Task Force, so she's here for 2nd year in a row for us. And she worked the phones at CAL FIRE headquarters in St. Helena answering questions. And Tom Patton is a volunteer in fire prevention for CAL FIRE. He's been a volunteer for 35 years, and he also manned the phones with Lori.
And there's something else about him.
Yes. What is that?
Oh, yes. Disconnected.
He is my husband. and when Lori asked him the other day, how did we get roped into this, Tom said, it's the company we keep. That's how she's here, because of the company. And Sarah Deacon, she was working here when I started in the literacy department. But she has gone on to be a teacher of early childhood studies, and she works at Mendocino College and Sonoma State University. And she also lost her home in the fire. But she's going to talk about healing and the blessings that came from it. So we try to get a variety of experiences so that not everybody was coming from the same angle. And it'll give you an idea. I know we all were hit by what happened this summer, but it'll give you little pieces of different ones' experiences. So we'll start with John, and then we'll go down, and then they'll tell their stories. We'll have a little break, and then we'll come back, and whatever time we have left, we'll ask questions. Okay, so John.
Okay, I'm told that this is not a microphone, this is a recorder for the video, so my voice is not going to get any louder than it is. I hope everybody can hear me okay. My name is John Hamner. I'm the general manager for the Calliope County Water District. It is the water system, public water system that serves the town of Middletown. Prior to the fire, we had 366 active connections. We now have 260. We know this is going to have quite an impact on our finances. We don't know how bad yet because some of our customers are rebuilding and hooking back up immediately. But I would say right now about 2/3 of our customers have not hooked back up, which is quite a loss of income. Something to be thinking about in the future as well. I saw Jan Coppinger with Lake County Special Districts do a presentation last month, and she mentioned the fact that all of the properties that were burnt, homes that were lost, the value of the homes is much less, and it's going to have a huge impact on property taxes for the county, and that's going to have a huge financial impact on the county as well. But back to my water system again, we had 366 active connections. I had a groundwater well that does about 400 gallons a minute. I've got 2 storage tanks at 625,000 gallons. I have a staff of 3. I answer to a board of directors. They're all volunteers, elected positions. 2 part-time office secretaries, Janet and Laura, both live in Middletown. My operator, Augie, who lives in Anderson Springs, and not Anderson Springs, Whispering Pines, up there on Cobb. My wife and I, we live in Clear Lake Riviera. We're about 30 minutes away from Middletown. On September 12th, my wife and I were both home. We were puttering in the yard, and because I am a bit of a internet news junkie, as I wander through the house, I occasionally wander in front of the computer to see what's going on in the world. And at about 1:45, 1:50 that afternoon, I discovered there was a fire up on Cobb. I told my wife, and we were both a little dismayed because of the previous 2 fires, or the big 2 fires that we had earlier that summer. So we were both concerned, and we knew we'd keep an eye on it, and the wind was pretty bad at our place. So I had no idea what it was like up there, but we knew that if the wind was anything like it was in Clear Lake Riviera, it was probably going to be pretty bad. Throughout the day, I was texting back and forth with my secretary, Laura, who lives in Middletown. And at one point, she told me they're talking about evacuating Middletown. And I was shocked. I thought, there's no way. The fire started up on Cobb. How could it possibly get to Middletown? But I kept in touch with her. And I want to say between 4:30 and 5, she texted me a picture with no text. And it was of a hillside on fire back behind a house. And I texted her back and I said, where's that? And she said, I took that from the Lions Club. And I said, the Lions Club? There's no way, that's in Middletown. And I kept looking at this picture, and pretty soon I figured out I knew what house that was. It was one of my board members' house. And I realized that the fire was in Middletown. I texted her back. I said, please go tell me how much water is in my storage tanks, because I know they're going to need the water. And she said, no, we're evacuating. The whole town is evacuating. We're going to get out of here. And I really wanted to know how much water was in my tanks because they needed it. At that time, we still don't have... they've got fancy stuff now where I could take out my phone and I can tell you how much water's in my tank. We didn't have that. We still don't. So I called who was my board president at the time. His name is Carlos Negretti, very involved with the tribe down there, the Middletown Rancheria. And he went ahead and went down to my office and looked at the controls for me, told me how many feet of water I had. I did the math, and I had about 550,000 gallons of water. And that was about 6:30 or 7 o'clock that night. That's a lot of water. And that was about all we could do. So my wife and I, Facebook was a challenge. We find that a lot of people repeat stuff, and after it gets repeated, some of you probably seen that exercise, by the time it gets to the end of the line, all of Middletown's gone, the Shell station at Hidden Valley, Kitts Corner. We kept seeing all this stuff, and it was just freaking us out. Part of me really wanted to know what was going on in Middletown. I'm brave in some things, but I really did not want to drive into the middle of a firestorm, especially with everybody leaving town to find out what was going on. I knew I had 500,000 gallons of water. I thought I was in good shape. Unbeknownst to me, apparently, during the night, whenever the fire hit the town, in addition to the water being used by the fire department, the homes that burned, 106 connections, that's Middletown proper, there's more just outside, but of the people that I serve, 106 homes. For each one that burns, the water is pressurized going to their home, and as soon as the home burns, there's no valves, there's no nothing to stop that water. And so suddenly there's 900 gallons an hour coming out of each one of those times 106, on top of what the firemen were using. As near as I can tell, I talked to Dave Minch, her coworker, and he says as near as they could tell, they ran out of water sometime around 1 a.m. His firemen were calling him, and he said, what am I going to do? And they said he started sending them to some vineyards that he knew had ponds, and also to the ski lake over there as well, so that they had some water to fight. But anyway, my system, it was dead. No water, 1 a.m. So the next morning, I knew I had to get up and go over there and see what was going on. So I got up early, did what I always do. I take a shower, I walk the dogs, make the coffee, put the coffee in the thermos. I'm heading out to the truck. It's just dusk, and my phone rings, and I might get a little emotional here. It's my operator, Augie, and I've never seen him this animated. He said, it's gone, John, it's all gone. The office is gone, the neighborhood's gone, hundreds of homes gone. I said, I went to Cobb. He says, Cobb is still there, but it's deserted, everything around it's gone. He says, I barely got here. He says, there's down telephone lines, there's dead horses in the road, there's wrecked cars, burnt cars. He says, it's just crazy. He says, but there's nothing we can do here. There's nothing I can do here. I'm going to go home and try to save my house, because he lived in Whispering Pines. So he went back home, and I'm standing there numb with my phone in my hand. And but I knew instantly I had to get over there. I had to see what's going on, because I knew the town was, he didn't tell me, but I knew the town didn't have water. And that's my job, is to provide water, safe drinking water to the town. But while I'm standing there thinking that, I hear this voice in the back of my head. It says, evacuate. Evacuate? Then I realize it's not a voice in the back of my head, it's somebody driving around with a PA system. They said, the fire is coming this way, evacuate. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing, so I still stood there. A few seconds later, they repeated it. So I walked into the house, woke up my wife. I said, don't cry. You're going to make me cry. I said, honey, the fire is coming this way. We have to evacuate. Boy, for somebody who's not a morning person, she really moved. She jumped out of bed, and we both agreed, okay, we're going to get dressed, we're going to grab what we absolutely have to, and we're going to get out of here. I went into my office. I've always got a bag packed, long story. So my suitcase was packed. I grabbed my laptop, folded it down, stuck it in the bag, and I turned around, and there's a certificate hanging on the wall that I had worked very hard for. I studied for months to pass this test, and I passed it. Grade 3 wastewater, again, long story. But standing there looking at it, I realized, or what struck me was that I could make a phone call, and for a few bucks I could replace that. I decided it wasn't as important as I thought it was. I looked around, and I decided my stuff was not as important as I thought it was. I'm ready to go. So I went out through my suitcase, laptop in the truck, come back in. Turns out my wife's stuff is a lot more important to her than my stuff is to me. But I'm actually kind of grateful that it took us about a half an hour to get her stuff together, because I started realizing I didn't grab my box of pictures. I had a bunch of Yuba College stuff. I teach classes over at Yuba College that is irreplaceable. So that extra time allowed me to get the stuff that I needed. I loaded up my family, my wife and the 3 dogs, drove to Lakeport, threw them all into my dad's house. And that's my dad comes from a long line of Okies, and my wife is German. It was an interesting mix. So I jumped in the car because I wanted to go back to Middletown. I don't mind telling you, I was frightened. My wife was scared. I got as far as Kelseyville, and they had a roadblock. And the CHP says, who are you? My name's John Hamner. I work for Calliope County Water District. He says, why are you pointing at your chest? I'm not wearing my Calliope shirt. And so he backs up and he says, this isn't a company truck. I don't know you from Adam. For all I know, you're just wanting to get in there to do whatever. After a couple minutes of conversation, he turned me around, and I went back to my father's house, twiddling my thumbs, not knowing what to do. About an hour later, I got a call from my board president, and he says, John, out here at the Rancheria, this is what we're using, kind of emergency command. There's lots of people coming here, and we have no water. Also, the fire department, you know, they're still putting out spot fires here and there. They need some water. Is there any way you can get here? I said, I'll try again. I got to the first roadblock, told them who I was again, and they said, okay, well, I'll let you go to the next roadblock, but there's no guarantee they're going to let you through. I went to the second roadblock, and he was very nice. I would say of all the encounters I had with law enforcement, 1/3 of them were very, very nice. 1/3 were doing their job, and 1/3, I'm told, most of them were from out of county. There was a couple of butt heads, I'll be honest. But again, I think they're doing their job the best they know how. Nothing against them. They escorted me over to Lower Lake, where there was another roadblock, but because I was being escorted, they let me through. And as we started winding over through Lower Lake, dropping down, I don't see anything. I just didn't see anything. I didn't understand what all the hubbub was about. Until we rounded one corner, and up on the right was a hillside on fire, and the flames were probably about this high, and they were coming down the hill. Everything behind it charred, gone, trees, and not a fireman in sight. And for whatever reason, my fear left me, and I just know that I had to keep moving forward. And then I started seeing everything that Augie described. Telephone poles burnt, lines down, dead animals still smoldering, wrecked cars, some clearly just trying to flee, trying to get out of there. Burnt cars, lots of burnt cars. As I pulled into, I almost said Hopland, I used to work there. As I pulled into Middletown, first thing I noticed on the left-hand side of the road, a little housing subdivision on Jefferson Court, which is where my secretary lived, and most of it was gone, including my secretary's house. And took a quick picture of it as I'm driving. Yeah, don't tell the cops. The sheriff took me to where my office used to be, and it was just a smoldering hulk. And he even asked me, he said, "Are you sure you want to stay here?" Because it smelled bad. It wasn't just burnt, and my building was built in 1979 from products from 1979, but also I had 3 55-gallon drums of chlorine in the building that burnt out, plastic drums. So there was a pretty chemically smell. But he left, and I just jumped into action. First thing I did is I had to go up and see if, because first thing I did actually whenever I was there is I went and I checked my generator. The generator is what we use when the electricity goes out to get the pump running again, the well pump running again, which is about a mile away. It was scorched on the back, but it was still in good shape. Next, I jumped in my truck. I drove up to my storage tanks. Fortunately, last spring, I had just had all of the brush cleared away from it, and everything around it just completely toast, but the tanks were fine. From there, I drove out to the well, out at the Diamond D Ranch. Burned buildings, carnage everywhere, but my well is fine. So I know it's good. All I got to do is go back and get my generator and get it out to the well. The one problem was my 2 utility trucks were parked in front of the generator. Guess where the keys were? In the building that burnt to the ground. I had no way to move these trucks. Well, I'm standing there wondering, what am I going to do? Suddenly I realize Augie was standing next to me, and I knew I was saved. So we jumped into action. I told him we got to get these trucks out of the way. We need to find a tow chain. So he went one way, I went the other. By the time I got back, he had found a tow chain, actually towed the trucks out of the way, drug them out in the middle of the street. He had hooked up the generator to his truck, and by this time we had 2 volunteers from the rancheria. We had Frank Hawes, the former general manager, showed up. And we had 2 teenagers that showed up, and they were volunteers. And we had the 2 teenagers in their little quad. We gave them the tools, and they started driving around to meter box after meter box, turning off the valve. Because once the water system was pressurized again, we didn't want that 900 gallons an hour getting wasted. So the 4 of us, the 4 adults, 5 adults, went out to the well station. We hooked up the generator, and it fired up like a charm. We discovered we had 2 leaks back at the filter, had to shut it down twice, fixed the leaks at the filter. I couldn't believe these filters had water going through them. And they were leaking like a sieve, but there was water going through the filters up to the storage tanks. We did what we could up until dark, but we realized because the storage tanks, 625,000 gallons, were bone dry, and it was going to take all night or longer to get them filled. So we did what we could, and we all went home. Augie went home to continue trying to protect his place, which is a whole story in itself. I went to my father's house. We were evacuated for a total of about 48 hours before we could get back home. And it was scary, not knowing if our house was going to go. But again, I had a job to do. The next day we went back. The generator had about 20 hours of runtime on it. While I was in Lakeport, I got some more diesel, took the diesel back there. It was a bit of a challenge to get through all 3 roadblocks, but they did let me through. They finally believed my story and let me through. That next day, I say it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, I finally had about 13 feet of water in the tank, and I decided that was good enough. Because what we'd done is we turned off the valves to the town so the tank could fill up, because you need the pressure. You need feet of water in the tank to give it pressure to get it through the water pipes. So we couldn't just try to fill up the tank and let it run out through the town, because it would have been leaking all over the place. So about 10:30 the next morning, we opened that main valve to let the water tank go to the pipes that were in town. And then we traveled all over town fixing the leaks that we didn't get the first time with the volunteers, helping turn off the curb stops at each home. The next 2 weeks were just chaos. No office, porta potties, working out of my truck. The one thing, cell phones worked like a champ. That was the one thing that saved us. So we could always communicate with each other from across town. Everything was done manually. We would fill up the tank during the day, shut it down at night, bring diesel the next day. The rancheria was awesome. If we needed bodies, diesel for the generator, they were just awesome throughout all of it. After about 2.5 weeks, I got a temporary trailer, which is apparently going to be my home for the next 2 years. It's going to take that long. It's going to take us that long to rebuild everything. So we have everything in place, and now it's just trying to rebuild. We lost decades of documents. We lost the 2.5 years worth of work that I had on my computer. They always tell you have a backup for my computer, and I did. It was in a device about this big, and it was sitting on top of the computer. Yeah, so there's my first tip. If you've got a backup for your computer, put it in a fire safe. And we did have a fire safe. We were fortunate enough to save our customers' records. Billing records and stuff like that. That was huge. We all wept a little over that one. The hardest part about rebuilding all of this, there's a couple of things. One is insurance companies. First of all, we were underinsured. We were, in order to get a cheaper policy, the former GM signed up for something called co-insurer, and we were 100% co-insurer. If you've never heard of that, that means, in our case, 100%, it means we pay for 50% of our losses, which means we were drastically underinsured. Just the filters alone, that we lost, and that was another thing. The filters were not in the insurance policy, so they're not going to cover the filters. We still have not. We've got a front from our insurance company of about $80,000, but we still have not settled. We're fighting with them, and they're dragging their feet. They say it has to go through another level, etc. FEMA showed up shortly afterwards. It was the big mucky muck with his little entourage following him. Very nice gentleman. He sat down and he said, and I quote, "When we're done, you're going to have a brand new water system, and we're going to use you as an example of what FEMA can do." I have since decided that FEMA stands for Fix Everything My Ass. It's not going to happen. They're going to replace my building and my filters, and that's about it. And it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of headache. It's going to take about 2 years to get all this done. The other challenge for me is 98% of the people have been very kind and very helpful. About 2% of the population are quite angry and upset. I get that. But they're looking for somebody to blame. And I've had people tell me to my face that we're the reason that their homes burnt down, because the tanks went dry. And I had one gal in particular, she called and she wanted to see the report, and I asked her what report she's talking about. She said, "The report that you give the state that explains why the water system went dry and you let our houses burn to the ground." And I told her, I said, "There is no such report." And she says, "Well, how are we supposed to file lawsuits if there's no report?" So I explained to her what happened, and that seemed to calm her down for a while, but we've heard from her a couple of times. And there's a couple of folks in town that are quite upset. But what I have found through all of this is everybody has their own way of dealing with it. I have two secretaries that both lost their homes in the fire. One of them has moved on. She's sad that she lost her stuff, but she's trying to get her insurance money. She's going to rebuild, and she's going to get through it okay. The other gal, she's just an emotional wreck every day. And I don't think she's going to recover. I don't think she's going to rebuild. I just don't think she's going to come back. I didn't sign up for this whenever I took the job. It's been quite a learning experience. In the last 2 years, I lost my brother and I lost the best dog in the world. I'm getting over those things. This thing is just a gift that keeps on giving. It just, it's something new every day, but I think it's going to make us all stronger. I think that's about all I can think of right now. Thank you.
That's a tough act to follow up on.
Sorry.
Thanks, John. So my story is not based on days and days of dealing with the fire and weeks and months like everybody else has. I can shorten my story down to 18 hours because that's what impacted me. I was actually at home. I live here in Lakeport. And when the fire started, I happened to notice the CAD page come up on my phone, and I saw the fire was in Cobb, and I thought who was on duty that day, and Greg Bertelli was the battalion chief on duty, and he's a good hand and very talented, and I felt things were in a good stead. But I was doing some yard work. I'd been on the elk fire the weekend before, and I was trying to play catch up. But I grabbed my scanner so I could listen to it while I was digging a fence post hole. And as I got to my driveway, I heard him order more water tenders and another chief officer. You know, Greg doesn't order more stuff that fast unless something's going on. In fact, he asked for another chief. There was something going on. I called our dispatch because Jim Wright lives right down the road from where the fire is. He would have been a lot closer, but he was out of the area as well. So, you know, I threw my boots on real quick, and within 5 minutes I was out the door. And I remember calling out to my husband as I left, fire on Cobb, I'll see you later tonight sometime. And about 7 o'clock that night I called him up and said, I'm not going to be home tonight. So but he could see the smoke column, he understood. But so I was driving on Bottle Rock, and I couldn't see the smoke until I got about Moore's Vineyard, and I could see out over the basin, and the smoke column, it was thick and it was white, but it was going straight up. The very tip of it was cut off, like there was a little bit of wind on it at that elevation. But from Moore's Vineyard, looking down into the basin, it was still below my elevation. So it was actively burning. But at that time, I didn't think we were going to be in for a hard afternoon, but I didn't think I'd be trying to keep out in Napa County at that time. But by then, Greg was ordering some additional water tenders. He already ordered, 5 more engines, and I felt those orders were appropriate. He's starting to do some evacuations on a small scale on the west side of Bottle Rock, just to get people out of the way. And I threw in, called our command center, and asked for a road closure on Bottle Rock. We're evacuating that area. We don't need, people coming in being looky-loos. It would give us better control of the road. And we agreed to meet at High Valley Road in Bottle Rock so we could do a transition. I was going to take the command of the incident, let him focus on operations. Before we met up, though, a call came in for a resident needing help with evacuation, somebody with a disability. So he was looking for the address. I was looking for the address. All the fire engines were already committed that were there. And we finally saw each other. We were already south of High Valley Road, so we stopped real quick to talk. And basically, I asked what he had going already. He drew me a quick map showing where the fire engines were at. I then asked, so did you hear about the burnover? And I said, no, I hadn't heard about that. What's up with that? And he told me what was going on with the helicopter crew. Thought that they were in fire shelters. And, okay, I got that. You go find them. And that was the end of our briefing. And he took off to go find the crew. At that point in time, other than the smoke column that I could see from Moore's Vineyard, there was no smoke blowing across the highway. There was no sign of fire or anything like that. But I needed to see what was going on with the fire. So I kept driving down Bottle Rock, and I went around the next bend, and all of a sudden I'm in thick white smoke, and it's obviously blowing across Bottle Rock Road. And I said, okay, well, I found a fire. And I kept driving because I wanted to see how widespread it was, and I was kind of surprised at how far I had to drive before I got back to clean air. I went back and I measured it a few weeks back. I drove a half mile through smoke before I got back out to clean air. And through the smoke, I could see a few spot fires on the east side of Bottle Rock Road, already across where the creek is. And where I stopped in clean air, I know I wanted to get my bearings, so I looked to the right real quick, realized I was parked in front of a friend's house, and the fire was backing down the ridge behind his place. And there's a 20-foot spot fire in front of his house. And the neighbor was trying to beat it out. When I looked to the left, on the left side of Bottle Rock Road, it was, a ton of spot fires in that meadow. And a movie quote kind of popped up all of a sudden: in Houston, we have a problem. And so I sat there for a few minutes, and part of while I was sitting there, I was wondering why I hadn't heard any of the radio traffic regarding the burnover. I realized I still had all the frequencies from the elk fire dialed up on my radio, so I took a couple minutes to make sure I got all the right frequencies plugged in. Then I could hear them talking while they're trying to locate the crew. And I heard Jeremiah on the radio by then, so I knew he was in the area, and he recognized the description of where they were at. So I knew somebody had an idea where they were at, and that a rescue would be shortcoming. And but then it's like I was sitting here thinking, so I got spot fires all over the place. I have a burnover. I have wind. I'm going to need a lot more equipment than what's already on order. So there are already 15 engines either at scene or on their way into the fire, along with a bunch of water tenders and everything else we bring to our initial attack. The air attack was already ordering additional fixed wing and more helicopters, trying to bring up the Air Force up to a more powerful entity. So I sat there for a couple minutes, and over the years, I've worked for a dozen years as a captain and as a battalion chief in the Cobb area. I admittedly rehearsed a worst case fire in Cobb, and so I placed my order based on that mental rehearsal. And so I ordered a whole bunch of overhead, more line supervision, 40 additional engines. I forget how many more water tenders and crews and dozers, but I went big because of the potential. And knowing I'd probably get some of that stuff within the first couple hours, but the rest of it would be coming from further away. The Butte fire was already going. They'd already lost 500 homes, so I knew there was already a whole bunch of fire engines over there. On the federal side, they were busy chasing multiple lightning fires up north, so they were already at a state of drawdown. So I knew I was going to be waiting a little bit longer to get equipment in there. Plus, Lake County has this wonderful geography that really slows down travel in and out of the county. So factoring all that in, that's why I went as big as I did with that order. And about then, the unit chief called me on the radio, and he wanted an update. He wanted a phone call, and I knew he wanted a phone call about the burnover. And while I was on the radio making my order, I saw Jim drive by. He had the firefighters in the back of his truck. They were wrapped in shelters, and I knew they were on their way up to back to the bogs to their heli-attack base to meet up with the Reach helicopter. So I followed them to find out what was going on. Most of the times when there are shelter deployments, most people just walk away from that and may have a little smoke inhalation, but they don't get hurt, and that's why we carry them. But I didn't know if they were hurt or not, so I had to go find that out. And I parked at the office and started walking out to where they were at on the heli base. I could tell even before I got there that they were hurt. Reach was already on the ground. One of them already had an IV started, and so within 30 seconds, I knew what I needed to know to make my phone call. I talked briefly to a couple of members of the crew. I walked back in the office to make a phone call to the unit chief, and I told him, well, here's what's going on. Definite burn injuries. They're going to go to UC Davis for treatment. That's where the nearest burn center is. And we only spent maybe 45 seconds talking about them. The rest of the phone call was about the fire. And he was already thinking about ordering a team. And knowing what I knew about what the fire was doing, and knowing I probably had 10 more fire engines that would be in the area within the next 15, 20 minutes, I felt I still had a chance of catching the fire. So I asked for 2 hours. And I thought that would be a realistic goal. If I didn't have it within the next 2 hours, I wasn't going to catch it. And I also threw out a decision point. We call them decision points. But if it gets across 175, I'm not catching it, and go ahead and order the team. So when I left Boggs, I needed to re-engage with the fire and see what was going on. And the fastest way I knew to do that was to drive down by Adams Springs Golf Course and get my eyes back on the smoke column. And that's when I knew that odds are I wasn't going to catch this fire, because by then the wind had really gotten on that column. The whole thing had tilted over about 30 degrees. Where it was going straight up, it was leaning over Cobb. And said, okay, that's not good. So I got back up on 175, and I remember when I drove by Hoburg's Resort that I'd seen a lot of cars in the parking lot. So I pulled back in there, met with one of the employees and told him he needed to evacuate the resort. And he threw out a question, well, like, are we at an imminent risk? And I could have sat there and debated all day long what imminent meant to different people. I didn't feel like that was time for that. So I just kind of laid it out to him and said, listen, fire started on the west side of Bottle Rock. It's already spotted across. It's on this side. There's wind on it. And honestly, I don't know if I'll stop it before it gets here. You need to get these people out of here. And he nodded in agreement. And I left. In hindsight, I could see his perspective, because there was no smoke in the area. There were no flames, no spot fires at that point in time. The only fire equipment he had seen was my pickup, and I think Chief 500 from Lakeport had just pulled into the area. So that's all he'd seen. There's no aircraft flying overhead. So I could understand his question in hindsight. But I got him nodding in agreement, so that's all I needed, and I left. And then I decided, well, I'm going to drive down into Pine Summit area by the pool and see what's going on in there. And so I drove down by the pool. There were already 2 other fire engines in there. And so that's good. But again, there's still no smoke or fire or anything in the area. And I turned around on Hoburg's and came to the fork in the road. And I haven't worked in the area for a couple years, so I forgot if I took the right fork. It ends up on a dead end. But it was at the preschool. And I remember thinking, this is a good thing. Oh yeah, it's Saturday. There's no school today, so I don't have to worry about the kids and getting them evacuated. And then, the light bulb went on, or actually probably exploded about that point in time, because I thought, well, if they're not here, then they are somewhere in the neighborhood, and they're in danger, and I got to get them out. So I turned around and grabbed my PA mic, started driving through the neighborhood, telling people to evacuate, because there's still a few people in the neighborhood. And went out Shasta, made a loop around, looked at the 2 fire engines again, looked like there were a couple of red spots by them, and I was thinking, well, maybe there's a couple of spot fires that are right there, they'll pick them up real quick. And then Salina called me on the radio and said, hey, we have a report of a new fire at Gifford Springs Road. And I thought, well, what else can go wrong today, right? So as I worked my way back out of the neighborhood, I was still doing announcements for evacuations. And as soon as I hit 175, there was nobody else on the road, so I could do 75 miles an hour. And I drove down to Gifford Springs as fast as I could. And I turned on the Gifford Springs Road because I knew I'd be able to have a good look into the meadow from there. And sure enough, there's another fire. There's already a half acre. No real wind on it or anything like that. About then, another battalion chief was coming up the hill along with a fire engine and one of the hand crews, and they jumped on that. So I left that in his hands. And I'd already made an announcement I was going to establish my command post at the Cobb Fire Station, and I knew I needed to get there because law enforcement, I would need to coordinate with them pretty darn quick with additional evacuations. And so while I was sitting there, and finally Willie Cepeda was on his way in from G700, and he finally got to a point on 175. He's trying to get to my location. Said, I can't get where you're at because the fire's already crossed 175. But that's fine. I still need you for an overhead assignment report to operations, and we'll use it as a division. And he did that for the next day and a half, by it sounds like. So he had a very crazy afternoon. He can tell his own stories on that one. But while I was sitting there at the Cobb station, the explosion started, and as propane tanks started to explode as the fire made its run through Pine Summit. And after about 3 minutes of listening to explosions, I kind of figured, basically, I remember thinking, my guys are getting their asses handed to them right now, because I knew there were fire engines up in that area, and with the propane explosions, that whatever was going on, it wasn't good. But then I looked at my clock in my truck, and every few minutes as the explosions kept going on, I kept looking at the clock, and it was just ongoing. At the same time, I was trying to get a hold of somebody on the radio. And after they didn't answer the first couple times, I thought, well, maybe they're a little busy. And after, so I waited about 10 more minutes, and I tried to get a hold of him again, and he still wasn't answering. I tried different frequencies trying to get a hold of him, and then I was getting a little mad because, I see you need to talk to me, because I'm pushy that way. I waited a few more minutes, and I kept trying to get a hold of him at the same time all these explosions were going on. And after about 25 minutes, I hadn't made contact with him. And then my initial irritation at him not wanting to talk to me turned into actual concern. It was maybe he's not talking to me because he's hurt. And I started thinking, do I need to send out a search party for this guy? But I waited a couple more minutes, and I tried one more time, and finally I heard his voice on the radio, so I didn't need to do that. So that was very crazy. And as the Gifford Springs fire started expanding, and they needed more equipment, we didn't have enough equipment between the two fires. Then my attention turned back to more evacuations. We'd already evacuated Cobb. We extended that to Loch Lomond, not knowing which direction the fire was going to quarter. Eventually, the next level of evacuations was getting people the rest of the way off of Cobb. So I ordered it from Cobb all the way down 175 to the Dry Creek cutoff, along with all the side streets. Basically start flushing the system. By then, I had a sergeant from the sheriff's office with me, and every time the air attack would call in a landmark, here's where the fire is, there's a spot fire over here. I think the fire's going to be in Middletown by nightfall. Those decisions just kept going and going and going. Normally, a fire hits a certain pace, it's really chaotic in the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes, then it kind of moderates and you have time to do more long-term strategy thinking. There was no time for this because it kept going the way it was. Eventually, I had to move our command post off of Cobb, and we drove down into Middletown. And I didn't know the fire had crossed 175 below us, and so we got down to about Arroyo Vista, and the fire was on both sides of the highway. And there were about 5 of us in the caravan, and the people ahead of me were doing a brake check, and it was like, don't do this, just keep driving. And so they kept driving. We got through it, and finally we got past where the fire was burning across 175 and got back out in the clean air. And I'm looking up on the ridge. I'm not believing what I'm seeing with the smoke column. And you've all seen the pictures. It was pretty ugly, and it had a lot of velocity on it, so it had a lot of air being sucked into it. And I was thinking, well, by the time I get down to Dry Creek Cutoff, I should be back in front of the head of this thing, and I'll be able to see where it's at. Well, that didn't happen. And the way the smoke column was rotating, for a second there, I thought, well, is this a plume-dominated fire, which is very dangerous. But part of me was in disbelief because that part of the ridge was brush covered, and you don't normally get plume-dominated fire behavior on a brushy ridge. It's more of a timber issue. And so I said, plume? Nah, it can't be. But I was trying not to rear end the car ahead of me because he was doing the same thing, looking up at the smoke. I finally had to quit looking at the smoke column and just concentrate on driving to get into Middletown because I had to be on a conference call at 6 because the team had been activated and I had to give them a quick briefing. And so, yeah, it was that type of day. And as I got done with the conference call, the fire was coming into Middletown. And just so you know about your water system, not only up on Cobb, but also in Middletown, working with PG&E, I told them to kill the power everywhere because of firefighter safety and knowing there's still civilians in the area. As the power poles were burning, I didn't want somebody getting electrocuted, so I killed power everywhere I could think of. And by then, the fire was spotting out by Spruce Grove Road Extension, and Dave Minch is out there, and he's screaming for fire engines, and I'm looking at my play sheet, thinking, I don't have any more fire engines. I've run out. But then I looked at one strike team of engines I hadn't put an X through, so maybe they're still up at staging. I called them up, said, are you still in staging? Yeah. I said, what else do you have up there? Well, there's another engine strike team and a couple of hand crews. We'll grab everything out of staging and get them down to Hidden Valley, because it sounds like he's going to need your help down there. And they did. So they got busy in Hidden Valley. We still had a lot of stuff that I had ordered that was still drifting in. About every hour we'd get another strike team, give them an assignment. Obviously it wasn't enough. And I don't think that if I had ordered 100 engines right off the bat, I would have gotten them any sooner than what we did. By then we had another division chief working with Bertelli on operations. We had activated a Type 3 team based out of Marin County. They were already up in the area helping us out. And one of their battalion chiefs came up, and they were working up on a plan for a day shift. And that was a huge order. It was well over 100 fire engines per day shift. Plus everybody that was already on the line that night was going to end up working a double shift. So I remember about 2 o'clock in the morning, things had relatively calmed down by then. Actually, I'll back up to about midnight. Battalion chief from Butte County came, met with me, and he was part of the incoming team. And I've known him for years, and really smart guy. And Sean Norman, he actually used to be a firefighter at Clear Lake Oaks several years ago before he went back to Butte County. But I said, what do you need help with? And at that point in time, I had no idea where the head of the fire was at. I'd already gotten word that the Pope Valley Fire District was setting up structure protection in the Springs area. And so you do me a favor, Sean, and drive out Butts Canyon Road and find out where the head of the fire is, because I have no idea, no clue. And he came back about an hour later and said, yeah, it's at the county line. It's at Snow Valley. And, well, that's totally crazy, but because that's like 18 miles from where the fire started. And the only thing that's comparable probably was the Cedar Fire back in 2003 did a comparable run. Actually, I think it went about 25 to 30 miles when it had its big push, but it's not something you normally see. And we've had plenty of north wind fires in our unit, but we've never had one do that. So that was kind of mind-blowing, but so about 2 o'clock in the morning, I finally grabbed a sack lunch to have a late dinner, early breakfast, however you want to call it. Sitting there with Bertelli, and we were both kind of irritated, trying to figure out where the heck that wind had come from. And because you take away 30-mile, 50-mile-an-hour winds, we don't have a 75,000-acre fire. We don't lose Hidden Valley. Probably don't even lose Middletown. Cobb, yeah, I think we would have lost that part of it, but and none of us had an answer because it hadn't been forecast. And I've actually circled back around to the meteorologist and asked him, because he did some weather forecasting for us on the Rocky and Jerusalem, and said, go back and look at your, all your models, what would it have told you? And he couldn't come up with a 30-mile-an-hour wind either. So it's just a weather anomaly that came off of the remnants of Hurricane Linda. We know that now, and that's our best estimate of what actually happened. But all I know, while I was standing out in front of the station at Middletown watching houses across the street from me burn, how frustrated I was and mad, and those are probably the two polite terms I can use for what I was feeling at that point in time. It's just trying to help keep other people calm. It's like the duplex right across the street from us, the propane tank finally vented, and it's a 250-gallon tank. And when it vents, it makes a big noise. The firefighters in front of me are in agreement. and it kind of rumbles to the ground, and the sergeant, he was visibly kind of spooked by that, and so the rest of us firefighters surrounded us and trust us. You want that to happen. That's a good thing when it's doing the blowtorch thing. So things like that went on, and it got to the point when I told them to turn the power off in Middletown. We started looking for alternate sources of water, swimming pools, ponds, and all that. So, you know, and we had ordered a whole bunch of water tenders, knowing that the water systems were going to be compromised. So that helped, and they actually got a good rotation going. But in the morning, I had to get to a briefing, and driving up Highway 29 as the sun was coming up, and I could start looking through the smoke further off the highway and realizing just how widespread the destruction was. Seeing the burnt out cars there on 29, and thinking to myself is, where did they go? You know, are they out there somewhere? Are they hurt? And I was pretty sure by the time noon rolled around that there were probably going to be 100 people dead. With the how fast this thing got up and got running, I didn't think we had time to get everybody out of the way. I'm glad that wasn't the end result, but for the longest time, until the people started being accounted for, because there were a lot of missing people early on, until that started getting narrowed down, you know, I carried that with me for quite some time. Like all the firefighters, this is not one of those, it was a bad day at the office, and you put it in a little box and you park it in the back corner of the brain. It's hurt everybody, and they're still dealing with it. So, in regards to the book, yeah, I'm writing a book to basically tell the story of the fire from the first responders' perspective, how decisions were made. And it's a hard book to write because, you know, talking about demons that are out there and stuff, but I'm moving through it, and I'm going to incorporate some of the stories from other firefighters, law enforcement that are out there, and help paint the picture of what happened during those first 18 hours. Thank you.
I'm Darlene Heckemarich, and I'm speaking to you as one of the residents who lost their home on Homewood Drive in the Cobb fire, Valley fire. I'm a longtime resident of Cobb. I've lived in the area all my life. I loved it. I loved my home. I loved Boggs Forest. I loved the scenery. I loved the mountains. And it was just painful to see what was happening at that time. I was not home at the time of the fire. I was meeting friends in Berkeley where we were going out to lunch, and then we were going to Berkeley Rep for the theater. I naturally had my telephone off, so I was unaware that Cobb was burning while I was enjoying my afternoon. And it wasn't until I returned to my car and I turned my phone on and it immediately rang. I think my son must have been dialing me every minute all afternoon in hopes of being able to reach me. And he told me that Cobb was burning and that it was being evacuated. He had a cousin, my son lives in Sacramento, and he talked with a cousin in Cobb who had driven around the area before evacuating and said that the fire had not reached Homewood Drive yet, and he felt the wind was going the other way, and he felt it looked good, so I was optimistic. But I felt the definite need that I had to get to Lake County. I just had to. So I was coming from Santa Rosa, and then when you hit Petrified Forest Road above Calistoga, then that's when you can see Cobb. I looked over to Cobb, and there was smoke there, but it was white smoke, and to my inexperienced eye, I thought, well, that seemed good. It wasn't dark, and I saw no flames, and so I was thinking, well, maybe the fire had been contained. And so I continued on and went up Mount St. Helena, and when I reached the top there at the peak where you have Robert Louis Stevenson Park, and then headed down, and that's when I got the ominous feeling that something was not quite right. I don't recall that there was really smoke there, but the sky was dark, it was eerie, it was oppressive. The winds were coming from all 4 points of the compass and just swirling the trees around in an erratic manner. And as I just kept going, I don't know, I don't think I was thinking, I was just sort of on automatic pilot. And as I neared into Middletown, I could see more and more cars coming the other way. And the thought occurred to me, am I going the wrong way? Should I be doing this? And I thought, well, no. The fire's in Cobb, and I was going to Middletown. And it wasn't until I really got into the valley and reaching Middletown, and then I could see the flames above the mountain, there on Boggs Mountain, lower down, coming into Middletown, and I realized, no, I was going the wrong way. So I turned around and headed back to Santa Rosa, where I had family that I could stay with. So I got into Santa Rosa and stayed with my aunt and uncle for a couple of days, and then with my cousin for a couple of weeks. And I think it was just the day after the fire, the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat had a web feed, a feed that was feeding online and you could access from your computer. And I could see a home there that they showed it several times, and I could see my fireplace in that picture. And it was a fire, the building itself was demolished, but it still had a rosy glow of fire around it. I could see, you know, my stone fireplace, the bird feeder right where it was in place on the left side, and on the right side, a huge 5-foot in diameter, unique iron wheel that was probably from some antique piece of furniture and farm equipment, and I knew that my house was gone. Little did I, so it was a couple of weeks before residents were allowed back into Cobb, and we waited those weeks impatiently and kept calling and seeing when could we get back in, when could we get back in. Other areas got in sooner than Cobb. I think they have a lot of clearing of equipment and cars and trees and something to make it safe for us to get in. And so on the first day that we were allowed back in, we weren't allowed to get in until around 5 o'clock in the evening, and there was this slow procession of cars going up from Middletown to Cobb. And then just the scenery that you see as you're going up the mountain, and where Boggs Mountain was just, it was a cinder forest, and homes that were burned all along the way. There was some greenery and growth on the west side of 175, but for the most part it was pretty bleak. Cobb Village and the school were saved, which was a blessing. But then when we arrived at my home site, our first view was just devastation. It was debris and rubble everywhere. The foundations were crumbled, collapsed rock walls. Anything that was metal was buckled, and even the remains of the workings and the wires of a player piano were collapsed, and actually would have made, if there was an iron sculpture artist around, would have made a beautiful art sculpture of some sort, something to work with. So we were not allowed until 5 p.m. that first day, so all we did was really have time to observe the ruins and see what was there and basically what was not there. So we returned the following day, my son and my cousins, and we stopped in Middletown at the distribution center where they equipped us with the masks and gloves and a screen type of a thing that you could sift your debris through, and they had, we had our own shovels and rakes, but they were giving out shovels and rakes. And so we arrived at the site again, and we managed to sift and rake through everything and found very little of anything of value. We found, but we did manage to fill up boxes of useless chipped cups, silverware, burnt coin collection, just odds and ends that somehow you feel, oh, this was that. And so I have boxes of this stuff that I still have yet to sort through, and I imagine most of it will burn, will be abandoned because it was of very little use, anything. But what did result from the fire was a beautiful piece of, and sort of an antique, elegant sculpture, and in it was just a bunch of things that had melted together, pieces of porcelain, cups, what ended up looking like globs of jewels, and it's really quite a beautiful piece that I will save and I'll place in my garden. And returning that day and really being faced with the fact that all my possessions were gone, really gone, made me again wish that I had been there at the time of the fire, so I was able to retrieve some of the things. Again, just like John, if I could have retrieved my backup drive for my computer, or one of the things that dearly pained me that I lost was all the historical photos and the history and the records that I had kept of the resorts and of the Cobb area that dated back to the early 19th century. It was one of my passions to keep that history, and people knew I was interested in that, so many photos were given to me, and to have lost all that was painful. Gone too was the framed documents of the wages and disbursement sheet for the month of March 1897, listing the wages that my grandfather earned as a seaman, the monthly wages of $25 as a seaman on a Pacific lumber schooner that his brother was the captain of. Other things I lost here. Gone was a doll. Gone was a doll wearing an outfit hand crocheted by my grandmother, which was a Christmas gift to me when I was about 8 years old. My mother's springform cake pan was gone. I just dearly love that. You can't buy a springform cake pan like hers anymore. Then there was my father's photo album showing the antics of his gang as they enjoyed the roaring 20s. And a lot of fun photos with silly postures and just crazy things that they did. Then there was the flag presented to me at my husband's funeral that was given to him in honor of his U.S. Army service. And as an avid birder, I really dearly miss the 4-volume set I had of the books of the birds of California, and that dated back to 1923. Each book weighed about 5 pounds. They were enormous books, and all on the birds of California. Now you get a field guide and you get something that's maybe an inch thick and it's about 5 by 7. So you can see I really lost something that was treasured and irreplaceable. Then the other thing that bothers me, still bothers me today, is that I felt I lost for my son. I lost his family inheritance. He loved that home and he loved the stuff in it, and he should have inherited it, but it was gone. And what was especially difficult for me was that fact that my daughter died. My daughter died 6 months before the fire, and to lose her, and then to lose all tangible evidence of her, was extremely devastating. And it was something even as simple as losing the locks of her hair from her first haircut when she was a little girl, about 5 years old, and then to lose the locks from her last haircut when her hair was shorn in preparation for a brain surgery. It just was all an unbearable loss, and it seemed to be something more than an individual should be expected to endure. But then I had often wished, that I had been home, but then I wonder, had I been home and I'd been able to save any of it or much of it? Because in hearing the stories from many of the survivors who lost their home and were home at the time, they really had very little time to save everything. They managed to get a few things, and then they also had to endure the trauma of the exodus of getting out of there, and I can't imagine how they did it, and I don't know what I would have done. Not knowing which way to go, and you get up, you take 175 down to Middletown, you take Bobber Rock to Kelseyville, you go down to Lower Lake, Cedar Canyon Road. Are you going into the fire or coming away from the fire? I can imagine, I'm talking to these people who did do that. There's a lot of trauma that stayed with them on that exodus and what they had to do. So you move on. We have the loss and then the challenge. And adjusting to that loss, it's devilish. You start with nothing, and just acquiring your immediate basic needs is just daunting. Early, you don't realize that you don't have until you need it. Early on, I cut my finger. I didn't even have a Band-Aid. And then, a couple of days later, I needed to mail a document. You don't have an envelope. You don't have a stamp. And it just, the ongoing just seems to just eat at you because you're constantly frustrated because there's no normal anymore. Many of us had several moves, and I moved first with my aunt and uncle, and then I was with my cousin for a couple of weeks, and then I had the opportunity to move into a home in an area that did not burn, that was close to my home that did burn. And so that was a gift, to have that, to give me time to decide what I was going to do. But in each place that you move in, you have to get accustomed to knowing what drawer is the silverware in, how does this vacuum cleaner work, which switch works what light. And now that I'm going to be moving into a new permanent home that I am buying, I will be going through all that again. But at least I will have the choice of where drawer the silverware is going to be. And then you have the reminders of the loss, and everything is ongoing. You'll be going on a normal day and you think, oh, I'll give, or I'll get, or I'll wear, or I'll take. And then you realize that you don't have these things that you're going to give or get or wear or take. They're gone, and it confronts you just in the most unexpected time, and you think, oh, I'll use. And no, you won't, because it's gone. And I won't even address the insurance issue, not the nightmare that many of us have experienced and still are experiencing. I think the insurance industry should be ashamed of themselves. But despite all the grief and the pain and the loss, and those who have lost their homes, we also have experienced an abundance of goodness from organizations, from individuals, from family, from friends, and from strangers. The giving came not only from individuals and organizations in Lake County, but also from our neighbors in Napa County, Sonoma County, Colusa County, Mendocino County. And from day one, resource centers were set up in Middletown, Cobb, Lakeport, Clear Lake, and even into Napa and Calistoga. And they provided us with just a multitude of things, with tools and clothes and housing and advice, information. And many of these were staffed by volunteers. There have been individuals and organizations instrumental in providing trees for those of us who lost our homes so that we can plant trees on our property. And then there were the quilters, not only quilters from Lake County, but as I understand it, from quilters all over Northern California that made handmade quilts available to us. And then there were the generous monetary donations made by caring individuals and organizations that resulted in generous payment to us, to those who have lost their homes. And then we have the dedicated work of the CDF and fire agencies from our local ones and then from all over California and some even out of state. And the debris removal people and the road crews. And I don't even know what other people are driving those trucks out there, but they're out there working and doing things that need to be done. I'm certain there are individuals here today that have volunteered their time in some of these agencies, either maybe a little bit or a lot. We may not know who you are, but you know who you are. So I suggest you pat yourself on the back, because you've made a difference, and we salute you. Thank you.
I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenge from a journalistic standpoint of dealing with a disaster. I've been in journalism almost 20 years now, and I also had great uncles, one of them who was in CDF in the 60s here in Lake County up on Kelsey Cobb, and another one who fought the Fork Fire up on the North Shore in the 90s and talked about standing with Jim Robbins in the North Shore Fire and watching the fire jump over him. So I had experience dealing with covering fires before. I had people who told me about their experiences. And one of the things that John talked about is that the bad information that was out there from almost the very beginning. People were claiming at first that the fire was actually in Clear Lake Oaks because there's several high valley roads in Lake County. And Greg Bertelli, who was the first battalion chief on this, was also the first battalion chief on the Rocky and Jerusalem fires. Greg Bertelli is a man among men. He's a great guy. And like Linda said, he's calm, and you don't usually hear like concern in his voice. And these were times when the calls were first going out on the valley. You could hear just Greg was starting to sound a little concerned. This thing was sort of like the Rocky. It just went exponential growth. So it's 4, it's 10, it's 20, it's 50, it's 100. I mean, it's 400, and it just started, rocking and rolling really fast. As we were, right before they started calling for evacuations, my husband and I, as we're sitting there trying to figure out how we're going to handle this, I said, we've got hundreds of friends in the fire area. We need to maybe start calling a few and putting the word out there and seeing what happens, including one of my writers at the time who was in his early 80s and he's not on Facebook, so he wasn't watching anything that was going on. We started trying to track people down just in the midst of keeping on top of the fire, and within, I think, 10 minutes of us even just starting phone calls to our immediate friends, the evacuations were called, and then it was just chaos from that point out. I was probably up until 5 or 6 the following morning covering the fire, and the immediate things that started happening was that social media started lighting up with a lot of unverified information. The explosion of the gas station, all of Cobb is burned, all of Middletown is burned, there's dead and dying, everything's gone. The Bay Area media started tweeting and posting pictures that they said were of Middletown High School that had burned down. And I got a guy who was Twitter flaming me that night going, why aren't you reporting that Middletown's high school is burned down? And I said, because I don't know that. And I'm a journalist, and I don't guess. And so then, I said, I'm going to go into the fire area tomorrow as soon as I know that I won't be killed, because I'm not going to get myself killed for your amusement. I have work to do, and I need to make sure I'm safe, and I need to make sure, harkening back to my great uncles in the fire service, that I'm not going to put anybody else in danger by going in there. The next day, I was kind of mulling over, who am I going to take? Am I going to take my old boon companion, my German Shepherd? Is she going to go with me on the ride? And a friend called and said, and I was planning originally to go up Cobb and circle out, because being in the media, I knew they'd let me through. It was stupid, it's dangerous, and for all sorts of reasons that I won't go into, my husband and I decided he would stay home, camp out, man the website, man the phone calls, and I would put a camera on the pickup and I would drive through the fire. So I was like, should I take Misha, my dog? Maybe I'll go up through Cobb. And a friend called and said, are you going into the fire area? She was one of the ones we'd called the day before. She'd been in Santa Rosa. She was on her way home. We called her to tell her your home's in the path of the fire. You need to get out. She called and said, my brother's children's dog was left inadvertently at my parents' home, and the little children are crying because they're afraid their dog's going to die. Will you go get him while you're going through? And I'm like, oh, all right. Where is he? I'd been to the house. I knew how to get there. So I changed my plan. I was going to go up through Cobb. This time I decided I'd go down through Lower Lake. I'll go try to pick up the dog, and then we'll go the other way. And as it would turn out, that was the best thing that could have happened. That crazy little dog that tormented me for hours in the car, it was actually the best thing, because I got information. I came into contact with people along the way who kind of gave me information to keep me safe in the area. I would have gone up blind if I'd have gone up into Cobb. Got down to Lower Lake, the big intersection there is blocked. And I'm in here, my bumped up little Ford Ranger with the camera on top, and they're all like, who are you? And I'm like, I don't Lake County neither. Go ahead. And there's some vans there, and I'm like, and I was raised, okay, I'm a Reagan era kid, so I was raised at the end of the Cold War, and with the idea of nuclear twilight in my head. So I get down there, I'm like, this doesn't look too good. And I get down past Lower Lake, and again, I think you mentioned, it doesn't look too bad to begin with. And I get down to about, I think it was Twin Lakes. I pulled over, turned on the camera, got it going, and I head off. And then it was a little ways past that I come around burning hillsides and fire 6 feet. Fire that was so hot on the side of the road, it blew through the cab of my pickup. I mean, I could feel it blow across me. And I'm thinking, man, I'm glad I didn't bring the big dog with me. I get to the house up on the hill, my friend's parents' house where the dog was left. I run up, I go up this thing, and there's a horse and some burros that they'd left out walking, and the horse and burros were calm, which is always, the horse and the burros will tell you the story, and they were like, hey, how's it going? We've seen you before. House up that way. So I go up and I go into the house. Now, the dog I was there to recover was a 2-pound Yorkshire Terrier named Henry. He was very, very surly. He's got a typical Yorkshire attitude. And I went in the house calling for him, and I heard him in the back. They basically, this poor family had decamped. They had run out, and of course he's like this big, and they just left him inadvertently. So I went in, I was calling for him. I could hear this in the back of the house, and I ran in, and there's this teeny tiny little carrier with the door open, and I could hear what sounded like a werewolf in the room. And so I'm like, hey, Henry, I'm here. And he starts growling worse, and the door's open. So I take my boot, and I close it, grab it, and I pick him up, and we're running through the house. I'm like, should I pick up toys? And he's growling. I'm just throwing toys out of the way, getting out of the house. I had to go down to the barn. I had to pick up one other thing for them. And I said, it's okay, Henry, it's going to be fine. So put him in the car, and I'm getting ready to leave the barn, and I hear this explosion. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, what just blew up? Was it a tree that blew over and trapped me in here? Now, and later I remembered the horse and the burros were like, it's fine. So, and it was very still. It was up on a hilltop, and I didn't see fire. I knew fire was just down the road. But I didn't know. I thought, am I going to be trapped in here? So I said, come on, Henry, we're getting out of here. So turned on the camera, went down. I don't know to this day what it was. Maybe it was a propane tank in a neighboring property going off. We got out okay, headed down to Middletown. It starts to look worse and worse the closer you get to Middletown. You start coming up on these burnt out pickups and cars and poles burned, hanging, wires still on fire. It was that weird gray twilight. You know, this was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon in September when it should look like this, and it was not. It was very eerie, very Mad Max. I get down to Hidden Valley, and it's just like there's nobody on the planet at this point. It's me and my pickup, and occasionally I'll see a fire truck. But it's just abandoned. And then I see one little guy sitting like out in front of the Hidden Valley Lake, like guarding it from whoever. One guy sitting there, and there's just fire everywhere. You know, you can see the burning. I pull down this one street. Now I don't know at this point that all the power's been turned off. All I know is there's burning poles everywhere. So I turn around. I was going to go down and take a picture, and there's this burning. I'm out of here. So I go back out, get back on the highway, and I head to Middletown. Now, the night before, there had been some guys who'd come into Middletown. I don't know how they got in. I guess they're on a media claim, who were on Periscope, who were showing pictures of the town. They claim burning down entirely. It was one neighborhood on Wardlaw off, but the way they portrayed it was that all of Middletown was gone. So I get up to just outside of Butts Canyon, and there's a sea of blue pickups. It's the PG&E ground force. It was like a little city there by the Middletown Bible Church. It was just, I was like, whoa, what is this? Signs of life. Get into Middletown, I get into Middletown, and Middletown's there. It's there. I mean, the downtown district, the flower shop, it was like the fire bounced, hit the flower shop, and bounced back out. You go a couple blocks in, the homes are devastated, but the center part, for some reason, was okay. So I stopped. I'm taking the picture, taking the video. By the way, this video is on our website and on our YouTube. It just had like 50,000 views. You can watch me drive through the fire area for an hour. You can see everything that was there. And the importance of that video later, people told us, is that you showed us what was there. You didn't just tell us what was gone. You showed us the context of the situation. When I was in Middletown, I made several passes through town. I stopped, took pictures, and I was posting to Facebook. Look, this is here. And I went into, first thing I went to look for was the high school, because everybody was like, where's the high school burned down? And I go in, and there's more PG&E parked all over by the school. I pull in, and there's the high school. And I'm like, Henry, the high school is here. And he's like, and I get out and I'm running around, I'm taking pictures of it, and this deputy pulls up because there's this crazy woman with an angry dog taking pictures. And I say, "Hi, I'm Elizabeth, nice to meet you." And I say, "So what's the scoop?" So he says, "Well, you're gonna go," I said, "I'm gonna go up to Cobb." He says, "Okay, well, there's gonna be wires down all over the place." And he says, "As far as I know, it's out of power. The power's been cut to Anderson Springs. It'd been cut all over further, but I didn't know that at the point." So I'm taking pictures, I'm posting to Facebook. People are now sending me messages, "Would you stop and check my dog? Would you look for my horses?" I mean, hundreds of them. And it haunts me to this day because some of the places, if I had gone there, I would have found dead animals, gone homes. I mean, I found out later, people say, "Yeah, we went there, everything was dead." And I just felt so guilty because I just couldn't. My friend was like, "You'd still be out there for a week if you were going everywhere." So we stopped, was taking pictures, posting, "Look, here's," and people are like, "What about the Jolly Cone? Is the Jolly Cone okay?" I'm like, "Jolly Cone's fine. You know, everything looks pretty good in the town except for the flower shop for some reason. It was the main one." Catholic priest, "Oh, where's the church?" And I think it's okay. I drove by it. The art center's okay. Went back and forth a few times. Then it was like, well, it's time to go up to Cobb. And this is when I got really scared. I'd been scared before, but I had people the night before, a friend of mine, saying, "Cobb's gone. Cobb, the people have said they've watched the whole place burn down." I'm like, well, I'm not going to report that again until I go up and I look. I don't want to tell people that. People are in enough stress right now. So I start driving up Cobb, and it's worse than anything so far. There's just homes along the way. There's a whole apartment complex just as you're starting up there. Gone. Homes gone. You know, jagged wrecks of cars and fireplaces and everything, just both sides of the road. Dead horse on the side of the road with a guy over it taking pictures, who we posted on Twitter later, and that's how the owner found out. I get up there, and at some point, you know, I'm nervous. I see down power lines. You don't really want to drive over them. And I get up to this point, I come around a bend, and here are two PG&E trucks. And so I just stopped behind them. And they're just and these guys are just calm as cucumbers. They're looking at burning stuff, and they're fixing it. And I just kind of stood there, and then sat there, and then they just kind of went off, and I just followed them all the way up the hill. And then behind me, later, comes a CAL FIRE battalion chief, so I was like in a little inadvertent convoy, just going up the hill, me and Henry, growling occasionally whenever I spoke to him. And we passed some more burnt out cars. We passed a car which I believe belonged to one of the people who died, who he had abandoned it and run up the hill, so his body was up the hill there at that point. It's just like, you know, I always loved Cobb. I always loved to drive up Cobb, and what I was looking at was nothing I recognized. I mean, it was just charred, spindly, you know. And we get up to Anderson Springs, and people are like, "Well, you need to go in Anderson Springs," and there's down burning lines across the entrance. I'm like, I'm not going in. There's just no way. I can't get separated from these PG&E guys. I'm not letting these guys out of my sight. I mean, we're driving over lines that are like 2 feet up off the ground. We're popping over these lines. And so at some point they got a little ways ahead of me because I stopped to take some pictures. I'm like, well, I'll catch up to them if I need them. Because I figured at that point that once we hit Anderson Springs and we hadn't been electrocuted driving over the lines, and the PG&E guys are going over them, that the whole power had been cut. So I start, still burnt, I'm still out of Cobb, and suddenly I start to see houses. There's a house here, and there's a house there, and there's a house over here, and there's another house here. And then I get to Cobb, and the center of Cobb is still there. I mean, I was just shocked, because I was actually starting to cry at that point, and Henry growled at me again. And I stopped at Hardester's and was like geeking out and taking pictures and saying, "Look, it's here, everybody, it's here," and like taking pictures. And that's when a woman and her sister pulled up and said, "Hey, here's our address. Can you make sure there's horses down at this place?" I said, "If I can get down there, I'll try to take a look." So got down the mountain, got down to Hobards was the last main stop I stopped at, which was a smoking ruin at that point. And it smelled horrible. I mean, there was burning asbestos. I mean, I had a respirator like you use for construction, but I never popped it out to wear it. But at that point, I stopped and I told my husband, oh my God, I feel sick. He says, you need to get out of there now. You're done. Load up, head home, come home. Later, I had 2 sores open up on my face from that experience. I had one on my nose and one on my face. And I got them to heal up, but my friends were like, you need to use neti pots, you need to clean out your sinuses. I mean, it was scary. I didn't know the stuff I had, I didn't know the stuff I breathed in. And even though I didn't stick around long, I just didn't know what I'd taken in. Got down to the bottom of the hill. It started looking better from that point on. Got down to Kitt's Corner, talked to the sheriff's guys. Went to Robinson Rancheria to meet Henry's family and hand him over to them. And at that point, I said, I pulled him out. I'm like, here he is. And I said, hey, Henry, it's been good knowing you. And he's like, he was so tired, he was growling for 6 straight hours. Didn't care anymore. But later they sent me pictures of the little children hugging him. Their auntie told them the special forces went in and got him. So I think to me the takeaway, we continue to, there are a million little pieces to this thing that I'll probably be covering for the rest of my professional career. Insurance, people whose homes didn't burn, getting their insurance canceled. The difficulties in getting permits through a system where you don't have enough planners to even approve them all because you don't have enough county staff. The counties, the concerns about getting FEMA and the state to back up the things, getting the cleanup, dealing with runoff off of Hoburgs that's ending up in the creeks. I mean, there's just, it's one thing after another. And I think the long-term concern for me is, I hearken back to, last May, they were talking about the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and how that the tens of thousands of people who still hadn't rebuilt their homes at that point. Now, our disaster is huge. It's the 3rd worst in California history. And the Family Fire Foundation told me that it was the most damaging event for firefighters personally since the 1906 earthquake, which we mark the anniversary of on Monday. My big concern looking forward is what Lake County, what Cobb and Middletown will look like in 10 years. Will we be in the same position where, they just did a survey that said 56% of the fire victims surveyed want to rebuild. 24% may, they're unsure, and 20% have said no. I mean, that's a lot of interesting findings, and we don't know how much of that is going to change. How many of those 56 might flip, or how many of that 24% might not rebuild, based on what we can do to get people the help they need. And so I think that watching this whole, we're in the next part of the disaster, which is dealing with the real world issues, and if people will go back and build. Or I think you're buying a new house, yes. Right? It's too much trouble in some cases for people to buy or to rebuild. And so you saw a little housing purchase bump in the fall when people were buying new homes or new to them homes rather than trying to rebuild. So I think long term, there's a lot of things we need to keep an eye on. And I'm very concerned again that people are going to get the help that they need, and there's so much different kind of help. I think we've got a lot of organizations coming in that are going to help rebuild. I encourage people, getting back to, I'll end up with the social media thing. I encourage people to actually talk to officials at all levels rather than just posting complaints on social media about when things go wrong. Because Facebook does not have a complaint bureau that they forward your complaints. And there's new issues coming out right now with people in the fire area getting fire fee bills for properties that no longer exist.
And no longer have a fire problem.
Exactly, exactly. There's people, it's a friend of mine who his family lost their longtime home up there, posted it on Facebook, and so I immediately, I got tagged or something. I called up the state BOE, how do you, what about this? And they're like, we haven't received any complaints. Well, they're on Facebook, so I tell people, even if you don't know who to call me. I'll see what I can track down, or call your local supervisor, or call it. Don't just do it on social media. Don't just talk about it out there. Give people solid complaints and data to fix this stuff, because it's not going to get fixed otherwise. And the second and third and fourth hand accounts that we have to chase down, it's just better to get people to talk directly to the officials that can fix it. And then I can go in and see if those officials are doing what they should be doing. That helps me to go, yeah, 50 phone calls, you didn't do it. And rather than 50 Facebook posts. It's something like I've never seen. I've never even heard about anything like this. And I think it's different when you experience it in real life. And you have people like, I've known Darlene, I've known all these folks. It's one thing to know somebody who has their home burned down. It's another thing to have hundreds of people you know who have had their homes burned down. You know, what do you do to restore those lives? I think that's going to be Lake County's story for a long time. How do we restore lives of the people, the men and women who are on the lines, the men and women who lost their homes, the first responders? You know, it's a big story, and it's going to be unfolding for a really, really long time.
Tom and I are, Tom and I are volunteers in prevention with CAL FIRE. We started out with CDF, California Department of Forestry. I joined as a volunteer in 1991, and our primary purpose for many, many, many years was to do road patrols during red flag fire season, to make sure that people weren't out there intentionally setting fires and also misusing fireworks illegally in Lake County. So we just another set of eyes and ears on the road where the people who are actually paid to fight fires don't have time to do what they asked us to do. We were taken under the wing of a prevention specialist in Santa Rosa named Susie Blankenship, who has basically increased our skill pool, and last May she sent us to a public information officer training, a one-day training, just enough to let me know that I never ever wanted to be the face in front of the press. And before that, we had also gone off to do youth prevention, youth fire setter prevention, which is working with youths who have been accused of arson and trying to prevent them from continuing that behavior. So we also are present at the county fair, giving out information about fire prevention. So having had this background, I worked 5 days during the Rocky and Jerusalem fire answering phones down at the CAL FIRE regional headquarters, where they set up a call center for us to answer phones, to answer questions from the public. And I worked another 9 days during the Valley fire. In the morning of September 12th, ironically, I had been down to Kelseyville Fire Department, where they had set up a meeting and training for 40 people who are being trained to be lookouts as volunteers on Canocti. And we had done paperwork in the morning, and I was asked to bring the paperwork, and that was my part of the day. And the next day we were going to go up to the tower itself and do some training. So I left the fire department about 1 o'clock or so and got home, and about 10 minutes later my phone rang and said, "We have a big fire, can you come down to the fire center?" So I kind of made a couple phone calls to some people and said, okay, I'm going to be gone for a while, and hopped in the car and drove down through Lower Lake and into Middletown. And I came down just as I could see Hidden Valley Lake subdivision. I looked to my right, and my only comment to myself was, holy crap, this is going to be huge. And I kept driving, got to St. Helena and put in a 10-hour day. I left there at about 11 o'clock at night. I had to come back through Anderson Valley and up 101 and Hopland because I'm a volunteer and I'm not authorized to go through fire lines. So it took me an hour and 45 minutes to get home. I went to bed. I was expected back there the next afternoon. I was awakened at 6:30 in the morning by the sheriff's department coming around saying you're being evacuated. And I thought, that can't possibly be right. When I left there last night at 11 o'clock, that fire wasn't anywhere close to my subdivision. But I got up and I looked out the window and I couldn't see anything. It was solid smoke. I couldn't even see the lake, which is only 400 feet from my house. So I thought, okay, maybe the wind shifted. I started throwing together a few things that I had actually planned on during the Rocky and Jerusalem fires. So I had a bag ready to go with family photos on flash drives, things like that, a few albums that wouldn't be replaceable. Unfortunately, as soon as the sheriff's department came around, my 2 cats disappeared. So there was no way to catch them. And I thought, well, all I can do is have faith that they're going to be okay. So I made 2 phone calls to some people I know who live up on Cobb, and I said, you need to get out and get out now. I stopped and knocked on my neighbor's doors, about 3 of them on my way out of the subdivision. It took me about an hour and a half to get from my house to Lakeport. And I showed up down at the call center about 10 o'clock, and they said, you're not due here till 2 o'clock. And I said, well, I don't have anywhere else to go at the moment. So I stayed there and worked all night, and they found me a place to stay at Mountain Home Ranch down in Calistoga for the next 3 nights while I was evacuated. I called my cat sitter, and I said, if there's any way you can get down and feed my cats. And she found a way to do that, so I was not concerned about my home, my property. I knew I was okay. But the call center, during the time that we were there, took in 24,171 calls, more or less, just answering questions from people like you. And a great deal of those people said, oh, I didn't mean to get a real person. I thought you'd be a recording. So we said, well, you know, we can pretend to be a recording. But what is it we can help you with? So basically what we did was mark down our calls. We put down the time the call came in, what the person was concerned about, and moved on. And at times, you didn't even have time to write down the time that the call came in. It was one phone after another. There were 7 phones in this room, and about 12 people constantly answering the phones. Everything from the silliest question you can think of to very, very difficult calls. For instance, I got a call from a neighbor of the woman down in Anderson Springs who they had tried, 3 of the neighbors had tried to get her out 3 different times and she wouldn't evacuate. And they called and asked us what we could do about it. We couldn't do anything they hadn't already done. And she called back about another 10 minutes later and she said, her house is starting to burn, can you send somebody? I can't send anybody. So, and then we had some funny calls too, of course. One woman called me and said, what are they going to do about the elk herd? Can you send somebody out to make sure they're okay? No, I don't think I can do that. All I did was say, I'll pass that along. No, what can you say? But it gave a public face to CAL FIRE, and it had somebody real on the phone to talk to them about what we knew to be the current situation. And we were probably kept less current on the current situation than most people. Unfortunately, we only got a report every 12 hours, but we had maps and we knew where the fires were, etc. We gave a lot of road directions. How do I get to so-and-so? I can't go this way, I can't go this way. So we learned a lot of new roads and a lot of old roads. And they, being in St. Helena, most of the people there were firefighters from all over the United States, basically, and CAL FIRE employees from primarily Sonoma County and Napa County. And they weren't familiar with the Lake County roads. So having Tom and I there to say, oh yes, that road is here, that road is here, that road is here, was a great deal of help to them because they didn't have the local knowledge that we had. And we learned a whole bunch of new roads we didn't know were there either. Tom.
Boy, I've got some tough acts to follow here. And I can't play the harp either. As Lori said, you know, we've volunteered for CAL FIRE forever. Lori and her husband were the best volunteers I ever got to work with. They're always available. I'm also married to one of the volunteers, and she's our hostess with the mostest here today. And I've volunteered for 35 years. I was, both my wife and I helped out with fire information during the Fort Fire and all of that time. And we've done the school programs with Smokey. You know, we've been frightened by lots of first and second kindergarten graders. You know, we've done a little bit of everything. We used to fly with volunteer pilots. I did doing patrols. It was always funny because I'm blind now, but at the time I still was visually challenged. And I was the one person with the pilot that we spotted 3 fires that nobody was aware of. And they always accused me of taking a box of flares with me. But, you know, I thought I pretty much experienced, you know, a lot of the different things throughout the years. I'm, both Lori and I and my wife are ham radio operators. And being radio nerds, you know, especially with me and having time, I do listen to a lot of the radio traffic. And I did hear this whole Valley Fire incident unfold. Listening to Linda talk about it, I remember all of those situations, especially the helitack crew. That was really scary. The other thing is, you know, in the last several months and even currently, you hear so much of the big media do police bashing. You know, they want to find everything dirt that they can find that any police officer ever did and get it on the news. Our little Podunk Lake County Sheriff's Department went up in that fire area, and they went in some areas trying to get people out. And at times I heard them say they had fire on 3 sides. At one time they had one that actually had one start going across in front of them as well. They risked their tails many, many times, along with the different fire agencies. I know a lot of the local fire people up there and people that came in from other areas. You didn't hear much about that on the main news media at all, which is really sad because, you know, here we are, you know, a badge and a gun and a Crown Vic are no match for flames and wind and trees and power lines falling. So that was one thing that really touched me, and I wish that there would have been a little more publicity. As Lori said, we did work the call center. We actually worked it for all 3 fires. This fire, you know, during the Rocky and Jerusalem, we had a lot of people, you know, from the avenues in Clear Lake and were concerned. You know, they were kind of a voluntary evacuation type thing. Most of them didn't know which side of the highway which was the east and which was the west. Didn't know what to do. You know, what should I do? And I said, well, you know, the main thing is you get out of there if you need to. You know, if you're ready, you know, if you got someplace to go, go. If you have time, pack a go bag. Well, what's a go bag? Well, you know, get things that really matter, get them ready. Back your car in, you know. Make sure you got pizzazoline, get some gas. A lot of people don't think about that. They go out and it's like, oh crud, the fire's here and I don't have any gas. You know, things like that, some basic things. During the Valley Fire, why we ran a gambit of things, every time there would be an event change, the phones would light up. You couldn't even hang up the phone and it was ringing again. It was incredible how many calls we had. Like Lori said, at one time I think we had 7 people answering phones. And they were, a lot of them were disappointed we weren't recording. And I said, well, we can't afford a recorder, so we use volunteers, they're cheap. You know? Give them a Twinkie and a glass of water or a bottle of water and they're happy for another hour. It was one of the most tiring jobs that I ever had to listen to these poor people, you know, so distraught. A lot of them dealing with, you know, animals. You know, it was just tragic how many people left without their animals. I think the first day I was there that probably 2/3 of the people were in Santa Rosa shopping when the fire started. The rest of it had some big sales down there. One lady called up and I thought it was the most ingenious thing I ever heard. She did not have a trailer to get her horses out. So she took a can of spray painted her address on the side of them, and left the gate open. You know, she couldn't think of anything else to do, and she did that. And I thought, well, there's some ingenuity, you know? At least it's got a chance that way. Probably the strangest or funniest or kind of weirdest thing I heard was we had a lady call and she was asking a bunch of information. This was actually during the Rocky Fire, but it was along the same lines with some other people. And she said, you know, I just out of curiosity, where are they getting the water to fight this fire? And I said, anywhere they can, out of creeks and streams and ponds and swimming pools and springs. And she says, well, don't they know there's a drought on? So there was some interesting ones. Occasionally we got a little bit of a snicker and stuff. I will say that the interesting thing to me was, with all of the destruction and the death, I did actually, I think Lori and I, and possibly Amy too, talked to the wife of the gentleman who did pass away up there. And she was so kind, and you know, she was apologetic, and it's, you know, and she ended up losing her husband, and she did call back and actually, you know, thanked us for being there, which I thought was amazing. You know, it was, but the people that were devastated, that lost everything for the most part, were the nicest, most, you know, caring people. I had people that had lost, I had one lady, she lost her house, she lost the place where she worked, she lost everything, and she wanted to know if she could come volunteer and help. I had a lady from St. Helena call. She had ordered 2 semi-trailer loads of alfalfa hay to take to our animal evacuation centers. We had people, I've got a strong back, I just want to help. Businesses, you know, just an incredible amount of people wanting to help. The news media, it was kind of interesting to talk to them. Thankfully, we didn't have to be interviewed by them. We had a number we could pass them off to, and I had that one memorized. Didn't need to see, I had it memorized. And but I did get to talk to a few people wanting directions into the county and stuff, and they were just kind of amazed, like, wow, this place is kind of, you know, back woodsy, so to speak. You know, we were directed to the fairgrounds, you know, and they were just kind of going, whoa, this is. But it was really interesting. Most of them, you know, they finally found their way in, and they were just kind of going, we didn't even know this was here, and which is pretty, you know, pretty sad but amazing too. One story I had several folks that I knew that lost their homes. This one gentleman that's been a friend for many years, he had lost his place up on Cobb, and he had just a month or 2 before found out that his wife had, I can't remember, stage 3 or 4 breast cancer. And then he lost his home. And, you know, he got evacuated at the last minute. There was flames, just a wall of flames at the end of their street when they finally got out. They weren't able to rescue us a little bit of their stuff. And they spent the first night just beyond Middletown. They have some that had rented a place there. And the next night they went to a kind of a small, not great hotel over, I think he said in Healdsburg. And, you know, they were trying to figure out what they were going to do. And, you know, and he was worried about his wife, obviously, because, you know, she wasn't feeling good. She'd started the chemo and whatnot. And he was unloading something out of his car the next morning, and there was another gentleman doing something out there, and the gentleman said, you know, are you from around here? Where are you from? And he told them that, you know, that he'd been up at the fire and had lost their house. The gentleman, without even hesitation, reached into his wallet, pulled out a $100 bill and gave it to him and said, here, have a couple of meals on me. That was just one small thing that, you know, the way people were acting. We just had so many people trying to find places for them to volunteer. Probably what I take most back with me from all of this is just, you know, hearing the people so frantic and not knowing what to do, people wanting to know if they could get back in. Could just somebody go and look and see if their place was there, which we did not have the ability. It was very hard to, you know, to tell them, well, we got to wait for the damage assessment teams to go through, you know, there's going to be lists, and then to finally let them back in. For the most part, I would say out of the several hundred phone calls that I answered, I'd say probably 95% of the people were very, very kind and very appreciative, you know, considering what they were going through. We had a few that were inconvenienced, that were the toughest ones to deal with. We had some funny ones. We had some sad ones, you know, it was really tough. But I got to tell you that the thing that really moved me, as what Elizabeth was talking about, is I also had, you know, been led to believe by things that I heard both on over the air and whatnot, that Shell Station was gone, and that you know, Middletown, the high school burnt down and whatnot. And, you know, we didn't actually get to go through there until the people were actually going back to their homes. We got to finally come back that way, I think one of the last couple of nights we worked at the center. And to see the stuff that was still there, and of course to see the devastation too. For it to go all the way out Butts Canyon Road almost to Berryessa Estates was just, it was nuts that it went that far that fast. And I will never forget that we went along Butts Canyon Road coming back, and there was a fire truck there. It was black. It just was just covered in black. And we saw a few firefighters there. They too, head to toe, covered with soot and dirt, and they just looked so wiped out. And the thing about people that don't remember is that, you know, that we had the other 2 or 3 fires before that, along with the Butte fire was going, there was fires going. So some of these guys have been on the line for just forever. And they were exhausted. And one thing we were taught at our fire information course was that CAL FIRE does not say lost. They say either damaged or destroyed. And when a property is destroyed that they can't save, I know they take it very personally. And, you know, it was really tough to see the looks on their faces and whatnot. That's part of what keeps me going back with this organization. I've been there for so long. I've been there, everybody's retired, you know, and I'm still volunteering. I don't know what I do wrong. But, you know, the way that they deal with things and the way the fire people in general deal with things is just, it's incredible. You know, what they go through and how hard they work and to still keep going and plugging along at it. When it, almost at times, you heard a seasoned 30-year division chief here saying, you know, I just never seen anything like this. And that's what they kept saying. So the last thing I wanted to comment to is before the people got to go home, we had already had, I would say, unscrupulous people, so-called contractors, wanting lists of properties that were down. Everybody was wanting property addresses, which, you know, is a credit card to looting. You know, and people were posting their addresses on the social media and stuff, so that was really tough to deal with. Also, undoing the social media stuff, trying to get it straightened back around was really tough. You know, we had the news media was watching social media, and they're calling up, well, you're saying this, but we heard that. And we dealt with quite a bit of that. And so that was one thing too. And I didn't realize that there's actual paid people that just go and research the social media stuff and try to undo the damage that's done there. And we actually had some of that going over some of the local radio station here. People would call up and they were given third and fourth hand accounts. And you know, people that listen to scanners, is great, but again, if you have 2 people repeat a story, it starts changing and morphing and whatnot. The one last comment I want to make is, you know, we were on our way down to the call center, and we were going over Hopland, and Lori was driving me, and she looked over and she goes, "There's tire tracks going over the side of that hill." And come to find out, we find this car that had gone over the bank, went down about probably 100 feet down over the side. Thankfully, there was nobody in it, so. You know, we kind of double dipped on that day and did a little more public information as well. So it's a good program. And for those of you who've got to get our plug in, if anybody has any, would love to volunteer for either for the lookout training stuff or for the volunteer and prevention program. It's a really great program. And for all of you guys that lost your places and stuff, you know, our hearts go out to you.
This is very dramatic to hear all these stories, even having been through it myself, but not having heard all of the details from these great people here. And thank you all. And I just want to share a little bit about more of the personal aspect and having gone through losing our home and the healing process a little bit. So, and we found that we feel really fortunate in so many ways. Having had, I just have to say, for instance, our insurance company wasn't difficult to work with. So, you know, that's good. It's not across the board all difficult. And so many people didn't even have insurance. I heard something that it was like 50% didn't have insurance. A lot of people that were renting didn't have insurance. And again, I heard some of those stories of people who lost their job place and their home and didn't have any insurance. And some were even, you know, not registered, aliens that weren't registered, so couldn't get help from FEMA or things like that. So there's been, obviously it's been, as we're hearing, a huge impact on the county and on many different levels. Almost everyone was affected in some way, and just everyone on different levels. And I so deeply appreciate the efforts of these people here that are having to do that difficult work of rebuilding the infrastructure and which is going to take years, as Elizabeth and others were saying. And so I just want to touch on a little bit, as I mentioned, the personal aspect, because I know that as my dear friend Darlene touched on, the personal side of it lasts for a long time too, and is a lot of recovery. And so it's just important for us as a community to be there for each other, you know, and even having you all come to listen is good. I have found that it seems important to talk about it, you know, and just have supportive people listening, and so that's something we can all do for each other. So again, even though we felt fortunate in many ways, and we are, you know, going to have a new place here in Lakeport and so on, it's also been challenging, and I called it from the beginning. I called it a profound loss, rather than a traumatic or devastating loss personally for us, because there seemed to be so much meaning that came out of it too. Letting go of things, the kindness of people was incredible, as others have touched on here. People that, you know, people that I knew in high school and hardly remember finding out and offering a big donation, or, you know, people that I didn't even know offering things, and so many things came flooding in, and it's been really interesting to see the different things that can help with the healing. For instance, allowing yourself to receive. And that's, you know, so often we're trained to be givers and so on, and to feel our worth by what we're doing or what our work is or giving to others. And it was really hard at first to accept people giving things, and somehow I told myself at one point, if there ever was a time to allow yourself to receive, now might be it, you know. And I just decided to do that, you know, to have that perspective. And I found that when I did just allow myself to receive, that it was a really beautiful thing for me and for the giver too. And so many people wanted to give, and I heard that over and over. And again, not only people in our county, but people near and far, but especially the neighboring counties felt it really strongly too, because they felt it was close to home, and they didn't know what they could do, and they wanted to give. And so often I said thank you to someone for something, and they said, no, thank you. We wanted to be able to give something, and we didn't know what to do. And so that's been kind of amazing, seeing that cycle of giving and receiving and how it helps everyone. And other blessings were that friendships deepened. That was another thing about allowing yourself to receive, even if it was to receive a hug or allowing someone to be there and listen to you, and then you got closer in a way that you weren't before, and that was really special. And another thing that I found was that if I was having a hard time, or, you know, dwelling on things that weren't there anymore or so on, it was really helpful to me to give to someone else. So it was both ways. So I think of, you know, my husband taught at Mini Cannon, and he knew some of those people that were in those really tough situations, and so we'd call them and give them some money or some things that we had, and they, you know, it lifted my spirits to do that. So just, you know, so much amazing learning. And then one thing that happened is, one thing that's been really, I did hear a wonderful talk by Joanne Saccato, and she was talking about how there's cycles that you go through, kind of similar to the cycles of grief that you've heard about, that there's different stages and so on. And she said there's cycles that we go through after such a devastating event like this as a community and as individuals. And at the very beginning is almost like a honeymoon period and a heroic phase, they called it. And that part of everyone giving to each other and kind of aliveness and working so bravely and all those things. And there's lots of support around. And you have grace kind of to get you through it. You know, when you're dealing with something difficult at first, you kind of get through it and you don't even, your mind can't even think about all the losses at once because you can't comprehend it. It comes to you little by little. So there's that period, but then after the first couple of months, a lot of those resources that came into the county, on a county level and also personally, kind of fade back, and then you're left with the more hard work phase of just all the different challenges that come of rebuilding and putting things back together, and then there isn't kind of that support around. So, but it's really important to seek support. And so, again, since everyone in the county has been affected, to just be there for each other and continue to offer support. And if you've been through something that hard, continue to seek support. Again, we're not always used to asking for things. And, but if you broke your leg, you would go to the doctor, she said, and you would get a cast. So if you have had a crisis in your life, you need to seek whatever supports are helpful for you, whether it's counseling or body work or taking care of yourself, exercising, getting a lot of sleep, you know. And there's a lot of very typical things, she was saying, that happen. You're going to see even through, and there are times where I'd be going along, and because we've been fortunate in many ways, we're thinking, well, should be over all this by now, you know? And it's, she said, no, for that first year or two, it's really an ongoing process. You may experience depression, anxiety, sleeplessness, many forgetting things. You might get triggered easily by things and so on. And just to know that that's normal is really important, and to seek support, whatever can work for you. So I think that's really important. And one of the things that that I was really drawn to as a support was music. From the very first night, I wasn't at home at the time, and I was going to pick up my dad to bring him to a folk music concert that was happening at the Soper Reese, because I knew that he would love that. And we went to the concert, and I was just like drinking in every word. Somehow, like, every note was meaningful. And I have found that ever since the fire, that I love hearing just local live music, and we like to sing and everything, and it's just, music is healing somehow, and it's connecting also with other people. So that's been a support. And then one thing that I've been thankful, my family was never much into material things. We moved around a lot when I was a child, and so it wasn't, you know, there are certain things that were really sad, and thank you all for sitting here for so long. It's been a long time, I'm almost there. But the hardest things for me to lose was like my daughter's paintings that she had made, because that can't be replaced. My mom, who died several years ago, the poetry that she had written, you know, those were things that were really grieving things for me. And as far as my material possessions, my harp was my most treasured material possessions, and we did not get the chance to go back and get anything out of our house, so we lost all our musical instruments, including my harp. And my harp was one that one summer many years ago, my grandfather and I both decided to learn the harp at the same time, not knowing that the other was doing that. So that was kind of unique. And he bought a harp, and he later ended up giving it to me. So I had it for like 25 years, and it was my special instrument. So that was hard for me to lose that. But what happened is, and harps are not real easy to find, they're kind of unique, and so I knew that might take a little longer to find another harp, and I definitely wanted to find one. So a dear friend of mine said, well, I think I want to put out feelers to different organizations that might have something to do with harps and see if we can help you find one. So one person she called was Chris Smith at the Press Democrat, and he writes a column about personal interest stories. So he called me and he he published the story about the harp and our home in the paper. Well, I got several emails from people saying things like, well, I've had this harp that my brother gave me 20 years ago and I've never played it, and maybe you would like to have it, you know. And so, and then another woman called me and said, well, someone put that article in my box because I have harps for sale, and she told me the story, and this is the harp that I ended up purchasing from that person. 2 other wonderful people gave me smaller harps, and I really treasure those. And this one I purchased for a very good price, and she told me all about the man who made it, that was a special friend of hers and a very spiritual person, and he made them out in the backwoods, but they've become well known because they're very good quality harps with beautiful sound. And her name is Jewel Shield, who sold me the harp, a very lovely woman who teaches harp in Santa Rosa and performs. So I bought that harp, and Tom asked, well, is it the same? Does it take some getting used to? It takes some getting used to, but I'm very thankful for it, and that my friend helped me find that. So I'm going to end by playing you a couple of tunes. You just have to hear it first. Some people just like to see a harp because I don't see them too often. This is called Planksty Irwin and Simple Branzel. I know, my fingers are shaking. Okay. I'll warm up. Here I go. Probably all heard this.
pick out a bottle car.
I actually have 3 short questions. Why don't I throw them out and then whoever has the answer can tell me. Number 1, what started this fire? Maybe I'm out of the loop. I have never heard, I've heard lots of rumors.
I'll take that one.
Okay.
I'll take that one as the official voice of the department. The cause has not been released yet, as frustrating as that may be.
Yes, it is.
They're still, they put together a very large investigation team to investigate the cause of the fire. They've interviewed people, they know early on where the fire started based on the 911 call that came in. And they, like I said, they put together a large team. They're making sure that they have it dialed in before they release the cause, and hopefully they do that this spring because that's an ongoing question.
Okay.
So,
I'm wondering about the propane tanks. Some of them explode, some of them don't. What causes that and how can it be prevented? Because, I mean, normally gas is not being released from them when they're just sitting there and being used, right?
right. Well, the propane tanks are designed to withstand a certain amount of pressure. I mean, that's how they contain the propane. It's all pressurized. They're all built with a pressure relief valve, so if they get overheated, then they'll vent off. But that's only good up to a certain rate of heat exposure. And after that, the gas will catch fire, and either it burns itself off or it gets too hot too fast, and it will blow up and basically split the tank in half.
You mean the gas is being vented?
Yeah, it'll expand too fast,
Okay.
and it'll overwhelm the ability of that pressure relief valve to bleed off,
Okay.
and so they will explode.
Okay, I see.
And we see it actually on even small structure fires and garage fires, especially everybody has all these little 1-gallon propane for camping and whatnot. So those will go. I've seen the 5-gallon size go for the propane, like barbecues.
Mhm.
I've seen those
Okay.
remnants and whatnot. So that fire ramped up on heat so fast that even talking to Willie Cepeda a couple of weeks ago, he told me that he saw a couple of houses off the end of Evergreen, the roof caught on fire even without having a flame front impacting the house, just from the heat coming up the hill. So
And fire safes, how good are they and what are their limits?
well, yeah.
The ones that normal homeowners buy.
One of our dozer operators at Middletown spent a lot of time in the days after the fire. People call them, go find their fire safes, and pretty much, unless you spend a real high dollar amount on fire safe, it's not going to buy you much on that type of fire.
So they have their limitations.
They have a limitation. They're probably okay for like a room and contents fire. They're not designed to take the total devastation of the house.
I had a fire safe that was in our garage, and it was an old one. I don't know, it probably came from Sigler's or Hobart's, and I felt that because it was old, it might have been better than the newer ones, and it did have thick walls. I had jewelry in it, and the jewelry got blackened, but survived. Brought it down to Kevin Ness, and they polished it all up. And I had documents and photos in there. But the documents did not burn, but they were charred. They were so crisp that when you tried to take them apart, they just would crumble, and the photos tended to congeal. And then also had some coin collections in there, and they melted.
Oh,
Yeah, so.
okay, thank you.
But I don't know if it was a good safe or a bad safe, but it looked nice and big and sturdy and heavy.
Okay. That's all.
Any other questions?
Sure.
What about the different springs fire, the cause on that? Is that, I'm sure, still being investigated?
Well, I think what happened with that, I think it was a spot fire.
Had to be.
Because one of the things I'm researching for the book is we have a fire progression map. It starts at 10,000 acres, and that was about 6 o'clock that evening. So I've been going back to the beginning. I've been listening to radio traffic. I've been listening to 911 calls coming into our call center and trying to connect the dots. And so I know at about the time I drove through Bottle Rock, it was probably, and it's after the burn over, so it was probably right around 100 acres. About 2:55, our air attack plane put it at 200 acres, so it was definitely into that meadow by then. In the next 90 seconds, our 911 calls, we have 4 different 911 calls, 2 reporting the fire at Gifford Springs, and 2 from within the Pine Summit area. Somebody reporting fire at Shasta, a resident on Summit Boulevard reporting his house on fire. And then at the end of that 90 seconds, the air attack had made them there a circle, and the fire was at 400 acres, and it was running through the forest. So that 90 seconds turned the tide totally on that fire. So that's part of what I'm researching. So I'm pretty comfortable that Gifford Springs was a spot fire during that blow up.
How much of the wind was fire generated? How much was natural?
We have a remote automated weather station at our inmate camp over at Canocti Camp. Peak winds on that right about 2 to 3 o'clock were 32 to 36 miles an hour. So, and that was not in the fire area at all. So that was just the wind. And it's at a lower elevation than the top of bogs. So the wind would have been higher up on the top, excuse me. And then as the fire started cranking up, we have a plume-dominated fire, like what I thought I saw. It actually starts generating its own wind, and so it'll amplify. And so there are estimates that the wind was right around 50 at some point in time, and I don't doubt it. I actually pulled out, I have a little Kestrel weather recorder in my truck. I pulled it out down in Middletown when it was really howling down there, and of course the battery had died. So, and to a point I probably don't really want to know, but the fire did generate some of its own wind once it became a plume-dominated fire. And then, but I pulled up, there are other weather stations in the county because of all the ag that goes on. I found a weather station out by Gwinock, and it only had a peak wind like about 25. So closer to the mountains, so it's 30 plus. And going back and looking at it, the wind had been increasing all day. And it was more noticeable, I think, in Middletown, but it wasn't so noticeable here. I mean, it was breezy, but it wasn't 20-mile-per-hour breezy. But that's what the Canocti rods were showing about the time the fire started. So.
What is a burnover? I'm not familiar. Is that where the fire jumps, it skips something and?
Well, what we call a burnover is people or a fire engine, the fire overtakes their position. And so basically the fire does burn over the top of them. So that's what we call a burnover. And it could even be civilians in a burnover situation. So they were up on a ridge someplace right when the fire made a very strong push, and they got basically in a bad spot, and they had to get into their fire shelters. So, and the captain got on his radio and called for help, and it took them a while to figure out where they were at and get a truck up in there to get them out. So.
How are they doing now?
Actually, that question was just asked by somebody during the break. 3 of the firefighters are back at work.
Okay.
2 of them came back fairly quickly. One of them, he was in the hospital a little bit longer, but he's back at work. One of those 3 has actually been promoted to engineer position. He's at our academy right now. The captain had the most serious injuries, mainly to his hands because he was trying to use his radio, and our gloves are not great for manipulating small buttons. But he finally got released before Thanksgiving, like 2 days before Thanksgiving. He's doing well. He's getting all the therapy he can handle. He's very strong mentally and physically, and that helped him get through that ordeal. He's gotten engaged since then, and he's looking at moving forward with his life. So.
And where can we get information about your book when that's going to be released?
Well, I'm hoping to have it out by the 1-year anniversary. So I still have a lot of work to do. But I'll make sure it gets posted around the county with the library and all that. So. And social media.
I talked to a witness in Middletown who said that he saw 3 fire tornadoes whipping through town. Do you have anyone else see that or photographs?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I would love to see photographs. I know that there was somebody else that was doing video, and they were at Spruce Grove Road Extension by Hidden Valley as the fire was coming across the plain, and there were fire whirls in there on
Yeah.
some of their video.
He said they were like 20 feet tall. He just watched them come towards his house as he was running.
With that, as dynamic as that wind environment was, very unstable wind patterns, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
Was that during the whole fire thing, or is that now she's talking about?
No.
That was during the Valley
That
Fire.
was during the Valley Fire, yeah. Because what happens sometimes, and we've had it happen in other parts of the state, you know, where the mountain ends and it drops back down into the flats by Highway 29, it's kind of escarpment. And there are other documented fires where, as fire comes off of that, it'll actually hit the flat ground and create a fire whirl. It's been documented in other parts, so I don't doubt that that's what happened just outside of Middletown.
You know approximately what time it hit Middletown?
Air attack called it right. It hit there about nightfall. Because I got down in Middletown about 6 because I had to be on that conference call, and it wasn't quite into town yet. But probably about 7:30, 7:30, it finally definitely came into town. And it came in from the north side from the high school, and then it circled around the back side too, where it came around from Dry Creek. So it kind of did that.
Can you talk for a bit about firefighting during the night? Do things have to pretty much stop?
No.
No.
No, actually, normally we like doing firefighting at night because usually it's cooler, and we take advantage of that and do a lot more good work. There are parts of the country they do less night firefighting because of the terrain that they're in, and it's more dangerous. But we like it, and we do it, and the people that are out there, they work all night long, and I don't think they took a break, maybe to grab a sandwich, and that was about it. They kept going well on into the next day. We even had some fire engines. They were told, go ahead and head on in and get a hot meal and take a break for the rest of the day. And, well, who's coming in behind us to help protect this area? Well, nobody. We don't have enough engines. Well, we're not going today. And they kind of hunkered down for a couple of days there in the Cobb area and kept patrolling that area and trying to do everything they could to not allow more houses to burn.
Well, you guys did a heroic job.
Yeah.
I just want to throw out, I think one of the most startling visuals to me even now is as you drive through the county with the spring green, you can see all of the fire trails that they tried to cut to where they tried to stop this fire, and it just jumped and jumped and jumped. And anybody who says that CAL FIRE wasn't doing their job doesn't know what they're talking about.
You and Tom recently took a hike through the Jerusalem and Rocky Fire area.
And
I know.
you.
I know, because I was there. Was
Yes.
it all ugly and charred, or was there some beauty out there?
It's pretty amazing the way the fire jumps around. People think it's complete devastation, and it's not. I mean, you'll come to areas that are nothing but black and charred and charcoal bushes, but with all the new wildflowers coming up underneath them. Because the combination this year of the rain and the fires has sparked flowers we haven't seen in years and years and years. But then you'll come to an area that's just emerald green. I mean, and absolutely gorgeous. It's like the fire was never even there. It's really incredible. Yes, Lou?
I'm just kind of amazed with the weather that we had earlier, that we didn't have huge landslides, mudslides. That boggles my mind, because I know there's so many places where the depth of the dirt itself down to bedrock is almost practically just very, very little.
But the fire baked everything on
Yeah.
the surface. And the
Yeah,
water
water ran
really
off.
ran off the first rains we had. We were lucky. And CAL FIRE did a lot of trying to stop slides from happening as well as they did restoration.
Rehab, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't just us, there were a lot of agencies
Well, it's
involved
true,
with that. Caltrans was heavily involved, the county certainly jumped in. It was a multi-agency effort in the first few weeks after the fire, doing what they could, because they knew the potential. They were already talking about the El Nino winter and all that doom and gloom, and they took that seriously, and they got on it and cleaned out a lot of the creeks and did all the other erosion measures that they did. So, and you can see it didn't happen. So, which is good.
I wanted to ask Elizabeth if you were sorry that you didn't bring your big dog.
Oh, they would not have gotten along. She's German, he was British, it wasn't. The odd footnote to that is that dog, Misha, who was my boon companion and who went to city council meetings, I ultimately decided to not take her, but she hadn't been feeling real good, and I'd been pretty plagued with nightmares because of the fire for about 6 weeks after it started. I mean, like waking up cold sweat type stuff. And that stopped the day she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She died 3 months to the day after the fire. So I lost my best dog ever right around that time. And I felt so guilty because it was like I wasn't paying attention to the fact that she was getting sick because I was so busy dealing with all this stuff. And one of the people who kind of helped me deal with my kind of come down off the fire was Greg Bertelli. We'd gone up to Boggs Mountain to take some pictures, which was, just an incredible one. We ran into Greg there, and I'm like, Greg, how are you feeling? And he's like, we're all kind of bummed out and dealing with it. And I'd said something like, yeah, I've been kind of bummed out too. And he's like, well, you know what? You have every right to feel upset because you were out there too. You saw it. Because I didn't feel like I had any right to be upset. I wasn't a firefighter. I didn't lose my home. I was a reporter, and it was really rough to deal with it, but I didn't really feel until that moment like I had any right to really be upset. And then that kind of just let me deal with it. And, again, I had other stuff to deal with, but yeah, I kind of wish in a way I had taken her now. She'd have eaten Henry. and the little children would have been sad. So, and I told her, while I was out, the BBC called, because we were getting a lot of calls from around the world about this. And my husband did a phone interview with them and told them about the dog. So by the time I got home, they didn't want to hear so much about the drive as they wanted to hear about the Yorkshire Terrier that was crabby for 6 hours. So,
Been there.
yeah.
Henry's famous.
Henry was famous, yeah. He got his more than his 15 minutes.
Didn't like Henry.
You're considering yourself on the periphery, you might say, and your reaction to it, and what you saw, is very typical of people. Like when I was in the military in combat, and we had other people that were support staff but weren't actually in combat.
Right.
They went through the same thing. It's still a traumatic experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me some time to kind of come to grips with that because I didn't want to be like a big whiner. I didn't want people to think that I was somehow trying to, get in on some sort of sympathy because I wasn't. There were so many people whose lives were devastated.
That whole area just shows everything's so devastated.
Yeah.
It's just really,
But
we're not used to seeing that.
But yeah, I think somebody said here, maybe it was Sarah, everybody's been affected by this. If you live in Lake County, you know somebody who lost their home or maybe died or lost something that mattered to them. I mean, so we're all in this together. And it's the support that we really need to show each other and kind of, as we're all, because the community is moving through this multi-layered grief process where you're seeing people who are really angry now about various things. And so yeah, we're all in it. Everybody needs to really be open to kind of being honest about how painful it was for them individually.
And I'm just going back to what, I've forgotten your name, what you said about the sheriff's department and the deputies being so involved. And I hope they're getting support that they need because they were out there in the trenches And,
They were pulling long shifts.
yeah, and so a lot of people put up the signs, thank you firefighters, but they didn't really realize, I mean, some people know that it was the sheriff deputy who came by and told them to evacuate and things like that, but I just don't know that people are as aware of the role they played, so I hope that we carry that message out there and when given a chance to say thank you to some of the deputy sheriffs.
You know, is Amy in here?
Yeah.
Will you tell them the story about the little girl in Middletown?
Oh. I was at the Middletown Library. We all had to fill in because Galen, the librarian over there, lost his home. And he evacuated to a cousin's house, I think in Calistoga. So one day when I was there, FEMA and probably 100 agencies in there between the senior center and the meeting room and the library. And they made the library a place where children could go while their parents were dealing with FEMA and other things. And there was this little girl in there coloring, and she came up to me. She'd made a picture that had hearts on it and said, "I love you, policemen." I guess they went in and helped the family and evacuated them. And she says, "Would you give this to a policeman when you see him?" And I had just come in from lunch and gone through you had to go through all the buildings to get to the library. And I'd seen him out there, and I asked one of my coworkers to watch the desk so I could run out and give him the picture.
Him as a policeman.
Yeah, policeman. So I run out and I give him the picture, and he just lit up and he says, "Where is she? I want to give her a hug." And so he started showing off with it to everybody, all the way through all of the buildings till he got to the library. And he not only hugged her once, he hugged her 3 times and thanked her. And she was so happy to give it to him, and he was so happy to get it, and he felt so good about it. But apparently they had done a lot for the family to help them to save their lives. So it was the cutest thing I ever saw. So. Well, we're going to have to close up. We've got 10 minutes till closing. So I want to thank everybody for coming.
Chief Vitale is my hero.
No, Chief Bertellier.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful man.
Yes, he is.
He
Been
saved
very
my
good
cats.
to all of us.
Did he? Yeah.
He went every 2 or 3 days to water and feed them, and I said, just put it out there. And he said, I will pass every day because I'm working up there on Rainbow. I was lower Rainbow. My house was spared with smoke damage. And I mean, he was a dream. He even documented.
And his wife Lynette was among the lead group that was
Right.
out evacuating.
Unbelievable. And his wife is rescued, but he said, I'm not going to send her. I will go.
He's a very kind man, and it's great that we have him. But the poor guy, he came and started here, and wham, he was hit with 3 big fires, or 4 or 5, I don't know how many. And
He had a definite baptism by fire.
Welcome to Lake County.
yeah, welcome to Lake.
He had one lady yelling at him during I think it was the Rocky Fire, about the evacuation of Spring Valley, or no, maybe it was during the Y Fire. Anyway, she started yelling at him, and he finally stopped her, and he goes, "You know, ma'am, I have to tell you, most people think I'm kind of a nice guy."
And you know, he's got a great mother. He brought his mother to my house to say hello. He's got a good mother.
Well, I want to thank the whole panel for
Yes.
sharing all their time.